IB Nation, welcome to the Irish Breakdown Podcast. We have a really fun one here for you on a Tuesday, talking a little transfer portal class for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish, the 2023 class. We're especially going to dive into the players, obviously, in the class, the impact they can have, and really kind of come full circle and talk a little bit about, is Notre Dame doing enough in the transfer portal, in its new transfer portal era? It's going to be a fun show. Ryan Roberts, Brian Driscoll, of course, the publisher at irishbreakdown.com, joining you live here. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the podcast before we get going here. Brian, a lot to talk about today, man.
Yeah.
But there's a really fun way to start this conversation, though, because we're going to
Well,
talk.
I mean, I thought, why not just have one of the transfers join the show and kind of talk about the process? Because, like, what is the point of all this, right? It's about acquisition of talent, but it's also about acquisition of fits and people that are going to make your program better in a lot of different ways.
Yes.
And Notre Dame especially has to really consider that, you know, when you look at the way that they have to engage the transfer process, because you cannot ignore any method that can add talent and quality people to your program. You have to explore all of them. And so what we'll discuss today is obviously, is Notre Dame engaging it properly, but then also point to the players that are there. And then one of those is Antonio Carter, who recently committed to Notre Dame. Antonio, thank you, man. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank y'all for having me. Thank y'all. I appreciate it.
So this has been kind of a wild journey, man. It's like, you know, less than a month. Well, actually, it's a month ago today. You announced that you were going to go into the transfer portal after back-to-back years as back-to-back years as a starter at Rhode Island. Obviously, you had your 2020 season cut limited to 3 games because of COVID, which if Power 5 teams think their seasons were messed up by COVID, I say talk to an FCS player about how COVID jacked up their seasons. But quite the ride, man. Let's just kind of begin, Antonio, and just discuss, obviously, after 2 very successful years at Rhode Island, which is one of the best conferences at the FCS level, you decided you were going to enter your name in the transfer portal. Let's just talk about what went into that decision, and what ultimately caused you to decide that was something that you wanted to do.
Well, originally, I thought about it, like very soon after the season. My parents we're pushing it for sure. Some of my boys, my teammates, some of my friends who don't even play with me, they were like, bro, Tone, like, you can do it. And, you know, you got the talent, bro. You got the film. And I was still like, you know, trying to just be humble about it, kind of take it with a grain of salt. I'm like, man, you know, y'all can say what y'all would like, but at the end of the day, y'all not the ones who gonna offer me or, you know, want me on their team. So I kind of just prayed on it. I prayed on it a lot. And I was just weighing out the pros and cons, going back and forth a lot. And ultimately, I decided I would do it. So that's kind of how it went.
I mean, you hear these stories about the number of kids jumping in the portal, and it's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, and there's just not enough spots at the FBS level for all those kids. So to a degree, Antonio, you kind of got to bet on yourself a little bit.
Yes, sir.
To make that decision, especially when you're coming from that FCS level, I would imagine.
Yes, sir. Definitely. And that's why, you know, beforehand, before I did, you know, make the decision, I just was being very transparent with, you know, the D coordinator, who was also my DB coach. And immediately when I thought about it, you know, I had a conversation like, man, you know, I'm thinking about it. I kind of want to get your opinion on it. And we both agreed that the best thing for me would be to make sure I graduate first. And, you know, I had a talk with the head coach, and, you know, they wanted me to stay at the end of the day. So I asked them, I said, you know, if I do enter the portal, would y'all allow me to come back? And once they gave me that confirmation, I was like, you know what, why not, you know, see what's out there for me. And that's kind of how it went. And God just blessed me. So.
Well, you jumped in on April 16th, I believe, is the day that you announced you were going to be in the portal. And
yes, sir.
I'm looking at your Twitter feed, and within 2 days, Virginia offers, Kentucky offers, Baylor offers, Louisville offers, SMU, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, Minnesota, Texas A&M, Georgia Tech, Oregon State, and within 3 days, Indiana, Wisconsin, Iowa. So it had to have been a relief for you, I would assume, that when you did go in and you took that leap, that kind of right away, it's like, okay, there's people that there's some programs out there that see the value that I can bring to them as a football player.
Right. Yeah. And it was very exciting. Honestly, just, you know, I was excited, but at the same time, like I couldn't even. My phone was ringing. I couldn't even take a shower at one point. I'm like, I want to make sure these coaches know I respect them, and I want to give them the time of day, and because at the time I didn't know where I was gonna go, so I didn't want to act like I was too Hollywood or anything like that, because that's not who I am. So yeah, it was crazy, but like I was very excited. Yeah, at one point it got very stressful, but I had to remember that Tone, this is what you prayed for, and you're getting it, so handle it as such. And yeah, it was very exciting though, for sure.
So Notre Dame offered, I believe, on May 5th, right? It's a couple weeks after you joined. What was the initial conversation with Notre Dame like, and what was kind of their initial pitch? What was it that kind of initiated some of that interest that you had in maybe taking your interest in Notre Dame the next step of possibly taking a visit and things along those lines?
So they had hit me up. Coach O'Leary had hit me up on Twitter. Around like April, the tail end of April, like and I gave him my number, and he told me, like I'm gonna be recruiting out there in Rhode Island. Like, I want to come see you. And originally, I'm like, man, it's kind of late in the process. Like, I don't know how much how much I'm gonna really talk to them. And so I was talking to my parents, and I kind of was leaning towards one school, and my parents were like, nah, like, we want you to finish the process. And that was my original plan. So I'm like, you know what? That's what I'm gonna do. Like, if it's meant for me, it'll be there at the end of the day. And I talked to him. We automatically clicked. He was pretty cool. He put me on FaceTime with Coach Freeman, FaceTime him a little bit. And I talked to my parents. I talked to, another one of my coaches from like high school. And he was like, you know what, bro, like Notre Dame is a great school. Like, if I was you, like, I would go check it out. So I bumped Iowa. Say, you know what, I'm gonna go check out Notre Dame, and that's kind of how it went. And then when I got on campus, it was well.
Well, you and I talked on Friday, obviously
Mm-hmm.
before the day before the announcement. We had a chance to sit down and talk about your decision. And the impression I got from you is it didn't take long for when you were on campus to kind of be like, yeah, this is
Right.
the move to make. What was it? I mean, you and I talked about it, but just share
Mm-hmm.
with people at home about what was it about Notre Dame? Because I mean, you went to Wisconsin, they did a great job from what you had said recruiting you. Ole Miss did a great job. Other schools that did a great job recruiting you. So it wasn't that you picked Notre Dame because other schools weren't doing a great job recruiting you.
Right.
There was something different. What was it about Notre Dame that made this? I won't say an easy decision, but
Mm-hmm.
a clear decision. How about that?
Right.
A clear decision.
Really just the quality. I keep saying quality, but that's really what it was for me. Like, just the campus, it was very chill as well. Like, it's not too much. It's not. And I originally thought that Notre Dame had lots of students because you watch the games and there's a lot of fans and all that. And then once they told me it's only like 8,000 students, I'm like, what? Like, that's smaller than Rhode Island. But I really like that though. Like, you know, there's not many students that get this opportunity, and I can play football and get a great education as well. So that was really what stood out to me. I had to find something that was different from the rest because they all offer, a great opportunity to get the exposure, that I think I need. And there's, the great competition. So what stood out to me was I can build relationships with students and people that I can have with for the rest of my life, because even if I do make the league, what I think the average is like 3 to 5 years. And so I'll still be young after that. And there's, life after that. And so that was kind of my decision. Like, man, like if I can build, connections with great people that, can help me to get where I want to be, then why not do that? And so that was kind of the difference for me.
I mean, it is kind of funny you think about it. Let's say how old are you right now? You're 22?
Yep.
Let's say, you're 23 when you enter the NFL. You
Hmm.
play for 10, you have a 10-year career. You're
Yeah,
33 and you're retired. I mean,
exactly.
that's still very young. You know what
Exactly.
I mean? And so, yeah, having that understanding of, hey, look, at some point in time, this is
Hmm.
going to be over. How do I use this opportunity to prepare me to have success beyond the field? And I think that, that's one thing that I was really impressed by talking to you about how you it's not that you're like, well, I got 2 more years left, I'm gonna have fun. No, you'd like to play at the next level, but you
Hmm.
also understand that there's something bigger to this. And if I am
Right.
fortunate enough to make it to the next level, how do I use my degree and these opportunities to then help me use that football to then prepare me for success in whatever I choose to do down the road? So it's
Right.
very fascinating.
Yes, sir.
So let's talk about football though, right? So obviously the
Mhm.
football piece of this is important. You need to go somewhere that's going to allow you to maximize the talents that you bring to the table.
Yeah.
You were a cornerback at Rhode Island,
Mhm.
a very physical and productive cornerback. I think you had 17 pass breakups the last 2 years.
Yes, sir.
Obviously very talented run stopper. We've broken down the film, all those types of things.
Mhm.
But the plan for Notre Dame is a little different, right? So
Yeah.
let's talk about what it was. What was Notre Dame's pitch, and just kind of your reaction to that pitch, and how you see yourself fitting into what they're going to ask you to do.
So really, at first it was a little iffy for me. I'm like, they got like some older safeties. Like, how am I gonna fit in there? And I realized it's like, man, wherever I go is gonna be competition. And the year after that, there's not gonna, like, a couple of them are gonna be gone, and just having the ability, like you said, I already got corner on film, and having the ability to play safety on a possible playoff team, and just showing my versatility, because I think that is what stands out for me, is the ability to, they only see a corner film, but a lot of these coaches are like, like, I can see him as safety, and I think I can do it too, because I have played a little safety, and I think it can take me far, what I'm saying, showing that I can already then play some corner. I can guard in the slot. I can roll to the post. I can come down and fill the gaps, and being able to play both safeties, I think I can do that. And also, if they need me to play some nickel or emergency corner, whatever the case may be, I think I can do it all with, just staying humble, continuing to work, and keeping God first. I think I'll be just fine. So, yeah, just being able to put safety on film at a great school like that, I think will help me a lot. So that's kind of how I decided.
So one of the issues that can happen when you transition, when you look at, okay, I'm going to take this corner and I think I'm
Mhm.
going to move him to safety, is, does this guy have the physicality? Does he have the tackling ability to move to safety? Because as you know, especially the way you played, you were aggressive. You'd come up, you play a lot of press. You were on the ball. They throw a bubble screen, you're on it quick, right?
Oh, yes,
As
sir.
a safety, you're coming downhill from depth. You got to be able to tackle in space. You got to have a physicality. That seems to be something you really enjoy, though, as a corner. I mean, and that
Yeah.
was the first thing that stood out to me, is like, this dude, like, brings a completely different mindset than what I'm used to seeing when
Yes,
I
sir.
watch corners.
Yeah.
Is that just kind of how you always been? Because I know you were like about what, $180 when you were a freshman. You're now up to
Yeah.
200 plus.
Mhm.
Let's talk about that part of your game, man, and just how you view that as something that that you take pride. It seems you take pride in it, but also
Yes,
how that
sir.
should help you transition to safety.
Like, really, you just see the reason I'm able to make all these tackles, because a lot of people have the idea that corners don't like to tackle, or corners can't tackle, and so they have all these runs designed to one-on-one with the corner, and here I am. All right, here we go, just making the tackles, and it's really just like, I really just enjoy it. It's something that I think is just natural for me. Like, my old coaches they would tell me, like, bro, like, even my teammates, like, they're like, bro, like, you're the best tackler I ever seen, and I'm like, it made me feel good, but at the same time, I'm like, man, they just, maybe they haven't seen a lot of people who, tackle like that. So I'm just like, man, I don't know. I think it's just natural for me. It's something I do enjoy. And as far as me, getting up to 200, it's really just, I was comparing, SEC corners, or like, I would go to different rosters, and, because I always felt like I could do it. So I'm like, man, like, when the time comes, if I end my career here, like, I want to at least have the size, you know what I'm saying? And I worked hard. I got to 190 the year before, and then I decided, why not go up to 200? And I was still moving the same. I was still moving well. So that's what played into that aspect of it, gaining weight. But yeah, I definitely do like to tackle. I think it's one of my strengths. And as I go to, play safety, I think I'll fit in just fine.
Well,
So when you
Antonio,
talk,
can
go
I
ahead, Ryan.
ask, because a
Mhm.
quick story for everyone. I talked to Antonio on the phone after he had got an offer by Notre Dame. And I told you on the phone, Antonio, I don't know if you remember, but
Mhm.
Jake Fire, who played linebacker
Yeah.
for Rhode
Yeah.
Island, I literally hit
Mhm.
him up. I was like, hey, man, tell me about Antonio Carter. Like, just
Mhm.
off the record. And obviously, he's giving me the record to put this out there. And he was one of those guys, man, that was like, one of the best tacklers I've ever been around. I'm like, if a linebacker's telling me that, that means something, man. That really means something. So
Yes,
just a
sir.
little cool story to throw in there.
Yes, sir.
So what are the things as you talk about making a transition? You know, you were a mostly an outside guy last year. I mean, you'd come
Mhm.
off the edge, you do a lot of different things. So it's not like you're just out there on an island blocking,
Mhm.
right? You did a lot of different things, especially this past year. I noticed that they used you a lot more on some of those triggers and coming downhill this past year,
Yes,
even
sir.
more than the year before.
Mhm.
But when you look at it, what is as you look at this transition, what are some of the things that you say, okay, as I make this move, these are aspects of my game that I've got to enhance or nuance or whatever the case may be to make this transition to safety, or kind of a nickel safety,
Mhm.
just being able to be that versatile player, which is a little different than what you did at Rhode Island.
My biggest thing, like I said, I've played some safety, and I think the biggest difference is at safety, um, you have to know more, and I think it's definitely harder on your mind, but corners is more difficult on your body. You got to guard these receivers and all that, but I think I would definitely have to be prepared to learn these plays and be ready to make checks and calls, but also just having field awareness, knowing where I'm at. You know what I'm saying? Getting vision on the quarterback, breaking on the ball. I think that's something that I'll definitely have to continue to work on, attacking the ball, making picks, but I know I'll just have to, keep enhancing my tackling skills. But I think making plays on the ball and going to get the ball will be definitely one of my biggest things. So.
No, that's definitely something that Notre Dame fans are going to want to hear. I put a stat out that last year Notre Dame's returning safeties, I think, had 6 pass breakups. You had 11 last year, or 10 or 11 last year. So obviously that's going to be something that's important. And of course, now being a corner, you've got more opportunities. It's a little bit different for for context, but it did show that you had a lot of playmaking ability. That's something that this secondary certainly needs. We
Yes,
talked
sir.
football, Antonio, but I really want to kind of give people a little bit of an insight into you, because I was really fascinated by the non-football stuff that we had a chance to talk about.
Yes, sir.
So one of the things I asked you was, you talk about kids that are in your shoes where you've got this opportunity to go to the Power 5 level and the NFL is right around. You play well at Notre Dame, you got a chance to play in the National Football League and all that kind of stuff. But it was really fascinating kind of looking at the other aspects of what went into this decision and the things that you want to do when football's over. When you talk about that, whenever that time comes, whether it's a year, 2 years, 10 years, 15 years, whatever, what are the things that you want to do as you look forward to what your life will be like after football and the impact that you want to have?
Hopefully just being like somewhat of a mentor. Especially nowadays, mental health is a big thing, and I feel like some people, especially where I'm from, don't have that. Although I was blessed to have it, but I know some students or some kids, have great talent, but they don't have the mentors or people to tell them right from wrong. And I feel like I was telling you, like no matter who it may be, like my friends, whether they're older or younger, they always end up coming to me somehow, or will always end up talking about some real life stuff, and they'll tell me, like, you know what, like, bro, like I'm not able to talk to everybody about this, but with you I feel comfortable. And I feel like I'm very personable, I think, and I'm glad. I feel like God has blessed me with that gift and that ability to, no matter who it may be, I can talk to them or feel comfortable with them. So I'm hoping that I could be a mentor um, for troubled teenagers or people who don't have that. And I feel like that's something God has blessed me with. So I'm hoping one day I could be that for someone. So
And obviously being able to, I mean, platforms matter, right? I mean,
yes, sir.
and you're gonna have a much bigger platform now as you kind of go from Rhode Island to Notre Dame.
hmm
Does that play it all into that, or is that just like this? It's just sort of a byproduct of the fact that this is my journey for football, and yeah, it's going to have some benefits, but or was it kind of did it factor into your initial decision of maybe moving on to the Power 5 level?
Um, how I see it is like I was thinking about I was gonna get it done regardless, I think. But like God, I'm big on my faith, and I feel like God works in mysterious ways, and I think this is maybe just another step for me to be able to do just that. You know what I'm saying? Having that, like you said, a bigger platform to do those things. I think God is setting it up for me to do that, and yeah, I think I'm gonna try to make the most of it and do what I can to continue to do what I want to do. So, yeah, I think that did play a part for sure.
I had a question. Ryan and I were talking. I asked Ryan, I said, what are some other questions that you want to ask? And Ryan had an interesting one that's always fascinating because your
Okay.
recruitment you've gone through two different recruitments, right? There was the
Right.
one that led you to Rhode Island. You're
Mhm.
originally from Orlando, right? You're from,
Yes,
or you
sir.
Oak Ridge. I think you Oak Ridge. Isn't that where you
Yes,
played
sir.
high school ball? You're originally from Orlando and made your way to Rhode Island, a little bit of a
Mhm.
little different weather. You're
Yeah.
not going to be in South Bend, Indiana. What was the difference for you when you talk about the two recruitments? Obviously, you want just, I got to imagine it was a lot different, but what was it?
Mhm.
What was this recruitment like for you compared to your high school recruitment?
This one was, I guess you would say, much more successful, but it was much more stressful as well. The first time around, I had a couple FBS offers. I mean, not offers, looks. Georgia State was looking at me. Boston College and Liberty. Boston College was really late in the process, like in January. And they were on the phone and they're like, man, we got to get you up here. Like, let's do it. Got to come get you to check out the school. And I'm excited. I'm like, what? Like, dang, like that's crazy. And so then, I talked to my head coach. I'm like, dang, I haven't heard from them. Like, what's up? And they're like, oh yeah, man, they thought you would graduate in 2020. Like, they thought you had another. I'm like, how they think that? So, and Georgia State, like they were showing interest but never pulled the trigger, and so as well as Liberty. So um, of course I wanted to go FBS, but I went on a visit to Gardner Webb, to Fordham, and Rhode Island, and I chose Rhode Island. Um, I don't know, I enjoyed it, and it was definitely, like you said, very different from this time around. Much bigger schools. A lot more people reaching out to me, but it was good for me. It was definitely a blessing, like I said, something I prayed for, and it happened. So definitely excited. I was definitely excited, and it was very different from the first time.
Yeah, I would, and the process is so much faster now. I mean, that's the
Yeah,
thing is you
exactly.
jump
Yeah,
in, you
yeah,
jump
it
in
was.
April 16th, and you got to have a decision made,
Hmm.
pretty quick, pretty quickly.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Well, Antonio, I really appreciate you joining us, man. I know it's been a wild month for you, and it's
Yes,
I'm
sir.
sure you're relieved, I would imagine, to kind of have this behind you and have this decision made.
Yes, sir. Yes,
Good.
sir.
So what's your plan? You're getting ready to graduate, right? When do you
Hmm.
when do you walk? When are you done with school? When do you walk?
Walk Saturday.
Okay,
Um,
wow.
yeah, and
Wow.
then so that's also a blessing. And just after that, I plan on just going ahead and working and trying to get ready for this next level. But I think with God, I'll be just fine. So yeah,
Very good.
yes,
Do you
sir.
do you have a report date yet for Notre Dame?
Um, June 3rd, I believe. June
Okay.
3rd or June 4th, one of those days.
So you're going to jump right into it. Summer
Yes, sir.
classes and workouts and all that
Yeah,
stuff. So
yeah.
you're like,
Got to
hey,
get
enjoy
some
your
running in
graduation for
these
5
next couple
minutes.
weeks.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Enjoy your graduation for 5 minutes, and then it's
Right.
ready to get to work. And then for what was it again that you plan on pursuing specifically for your degree?
um, I graduated with health sciences.
Hmm.
And then I'm gonna figure out, we're discussing it, me and Kenny at Notre Dame. We're discussing what's the best situation or for me to go ahead and pursue. So I'm applying today, and then we're gonna go from there. So
All right, so Tony, what's the last thing you want to leave Notre Dame fans with when it comes to getting to know Mr. Antonio Carter, the latest pickup for the Irish in the transfer portal?
with God, all things are possible, and I'm just ready to work, and I'm excited. So I thank y'all for having me, and let's go Irish.
Antonio, thanks for joining us, man. We appreciate you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
All right,
Thank
buddy.
y'all.
Talk to you soon. Folks, that is Antonio Carter. Thank you, Antonio, for joining us. That was a lot of fun, Ryan. That is a really excellent young man. I really enjoyed getting to know him. You have got a chance to talk to him a little bit during this process as well. And pretty in an important pickup for Notre Dame as well, obviously.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're going to talk about that in the main section of the show today. But I really look. I mean, at the end of the day, Brian, you already talked about it a little bit. But Notre Dame, when you're going to hit the transfer portal, it's more than just landing good football players, which Antonio Carter is. It's about landing good people to add into the program, because I think we lose sight of that sometimes. It wasn't that. I'm not going to use anybody from last year as an example because that's very mean, but there's some times where you bring players in and maybe it's just not a good fit. It's not a good mesh. It doesn't work because yes, Antonio has 2 years of eligibility, but there's a possibility it's only one, right? So in that year or two, whatever it ends up being, you can have those clashing moments between a guy that's been there 4, 5, 6 years and a guy that's only going to be there for 1 year. So you really have to be very selective, in my opinion, about bringing in what type of people that you're bringing in ultimately. So I think that what you see from this conversation that we've had is that he's a very soft-spoken and very good young man on top of being a talented football player. So I think he'll be a great fit for Notre Dame.
Very thoughtful. And like one of the things that he and I talked about, and I didn't ask him anything about this because I didn't want to just repeat all the questions that I asked him in the interview, on the written interview. But one of the things he talked a lot about when I interviewed him on that Friday before he announced his decision was, look, it's not about me. He said this a lot. It's not about me. It's just about the team. This is, basically a team sport and those type of things. And he kind of got into the fact that, look, I want to go somewhere and play for a championship. And he'd mentioned that briefly in here, but he talked a lot about his role in the team and helping the team and playing for a championship and things like that. And he once mentioned sort of like playing at the next level, but it was very much a sort of like a, sure, I'd like to do this, but my focus is on the team and championship and all this kind of stuff and fitting in. Right. And you even heard him when he talked about the decision. He knows he's not walking in here with a promised job. He knows he's got to go out and earn an opportunity at Notre Dame and could very well be. He kind of talked like he expects to be sort of more of a rotation guy in his first year. And to kind of have that mentality is like, that's the kind of guy that will come in and fit really well with what they're doing at Notre Dame. And a guy that will be embraced in the locker room a lot easier than a guy that comes in and is just sort of like, okay, you're here to serve me and my goals and my objectives. And so I think that's going to be a really nice, should make for a really smooth transition as well, in my opinion, when a kid comes in with that kind of attitude, like, hey, I got to, nobody here cares, Notre Dame cares what I did at Rhode Island. I got to go earn it. I got to go prove it. And he gets that. And he gets that. So he's coming in with that kind of mindset of he's got a lot to prove and he wants to be part of something special. And you heard him say at the beginning, Ryan, is like, chance to play for in the playoff.
Yes.
And I think that combination of playoff championship potential with I get a big time degree is something that was really attractive to him. And he's not the only one. I mean, we've heard this from some other guys that have transferred in as well. So really, really intrigued, really interesting young man. And so I wanted to give people a chance at the end to hear more about his heart and kind of what he wants to do with life after football. Because his whole thing is, I want to have an impact in people's lives, man. And love to hear it. Love to hear it. Good football player though too, Ryan.
He is. And I think that the cornerback background is really interesting in this one, Brian, because you mentioned the ball production conversation, right? The safeties only having 6 pass breakups last year and needing more guys to get hands on the football, be disruptive. With a cornerback background, you anticipate that Antonio will have the ability to maybe force more big plays as far as turnover-worthy opportunities. So I think that he has that background that is super interesting. We've talked about, not only just playing safety, but there might be some other situations like maybe he's going to come play a little bit of nickel at times. Maybe he's going to move around the secondary a little bit, be a little bit of a movable chess piece. Notre Dame needs depth at safety. They need impact depth at safety, and they need playmakers at safety. So adding a player with the background that he has and the ball production he has had over the last 2 years, I think it's a very good opportunity to potentially get some game-changing plays in the secondary as well.
So, Ryan, when you look at Notre Dame's ability to impact the transfer portal, obviously Notre Dame was you look at the transfers they had last year. Obviously, there were some guys that were somewhat impactful. I think Chris Smith was a great addition in the portal. Not sure we would have thought that when he first signed. Like, nice depth player. Sure. Ended up being a very important depth player for Notre Dame last year. Brandon Joseph obviously came in from Northwestern. Yeah, John Sott did a great job as the punter, and Blake Grupe as the kicker. But they didn't really have a ton of numbers and impact in the portal. And this year they hit it a little bit harder this year, Ryan. And that's kind of going to be the focus of today's show, is just sort of the impact that Notre Dame was able to have in the transfer portal. And I think when we kind of look at it, Ryan, it really comes down to Notre Dame has to engage the portal.
Yep.
The question, however, is how. And so I want to evaluate today how they engaged it so far for this year. And then we'll dive into what do they need to do differently moving forward, if anything. And we'll dive into that part second. But I'll say this transfer class is not getting a lot of national attention. You go to all the sites that rank transfer classes, and Notre Dame's not going to be in there for two reasons. Number one, numbers. I mean, there's teams, Ryan, that have close to, Colorado's got like, 30, close to 30 incoming transfers.
Because they need to.
Right. And there's other teams that are just bringing in a mess of transfers. USC brings in a ton. So there's going to be that too. And then the other part is I do think some of the guys that Notre Dame landed are being very undervalued and not really being recognized for the impact that I think they're going to bring. But just big picture, Ryan, I think this transfer class is going to be very impactful for Notre Dame. Yeah. And I'm not just talking about the quarterback.
Yeah, I mean, because I think you have to pick your spots with it, right, Brian? I mean, we've talked about Notre Dame is always going to be a team and should always be a team that is still building their roster internally through the high school level. I mean, you think about this, if we're going to compare it to like an NFL draft sphere of like NFL, you're going to build through the draft comparative to consistently building through free agency every single year. That's kind of how I would kind of quantify this. So I think Notre Dame, with that mission in mind, you still can't become an absolute team where you say, I'm only building through the high school ranks and I'm never going to touch the transfer portal. Because in this world that is so volatile now, I mean, we just saw a couple weeks span where Notre Dame loses Logan Diggs. They lose Lorenzo Styles. They lose Tyler Buckner. Roster construction can be so volatile nowadays with guys leaving so abruptly and so quickly with the transfer portal. You have to be able to bring some players in that bring a level of experience and bring a level of, we also talk about the high floor players from the high school perspective, but what's a higher floor than a guy that's literally been in a weight program in college football, has been through the ringer, has played college football, has starts under their belt. I think that Notre Dame has to balance. They're still a high school driven team, but you have to bring in some impact guys in certain spots every single year, because there's no team that is going to be fully untouched from attrition of the transfer portal. You're going to lose guys every single year. And I think the best way to minimize the losses is to be able to bring in some guys that have experience playing on the college level. So I think that you have to be able to touch both markets, in my opinion.
So obviously when you talk about Notre Dame, the transfer portal, it begins with Sam Hartman. Yes. Right. I mean, that's where we have to begin, because that was clearly the most impact transfer pickup that we've seen. And I think when you look at Notre Dame's excitement for the team this year, that a lot of Notre Dame fans have, I know that we certainly have, it has a lot to do with Sam Hartman, because we have said for years the one thing holding Notre Dame back has been quarterback play for the most part. Now, there's been a couple years where quarterback play was pretty good and the defense let them down. 2015 is something that pops into my head, for example, and so. Is the biggest example, where the offense was good enough in a lot of ways, but the reality is the defense wasn't good enough. But for the most part, quarterback play has just not been good enough for Notre Dame to be a true title contender. Even when it was good enough to get them to the playoff, they were so outmatched at the quarterback position when they got to the playoff, and it wasn't the only one, but it was the most glaring one. Sure, that you needed a quarterback that could get to that level, and at worst, I've seen one site ranked Sam Hartman as the number 2 transfer. One site ranked him number 2 behind Shedeur Sanders. One site I saw ranked him number 2 behind, I think, Devin Leary. And then everyone else that I've seen has him as the number 1 transfer portal quarterback and that was in the market this year. So it was a huge, huge pickup for Notre Dame to get a guy like Sam Hartman and throw him into the mix. And he went out and won the job I mean, unsurprisingly. But
Yeah.
I thought Tyler Buckner played very well this spring. So it's not like he just walked in and everybody else stunk and quarterback play was terrible and he won it with ease. He had to earn it. And I think that's something in the end of the day is going to make him Ryan, you see it, right? I mean, you see it in the interactions on the videos that Notre Dame is putting out and his interactions with like Cam Hart and the guys that are out in California doing what they're doing out in California right now with that organization out there. You see it in the videos they put out after he scores that winning touchdown in the scrimmage before the blue gold game.
Yeah.
You can see how his teammates react to him on the sideline at the blue gold game. We saw it live. You could see it on TV. I think him having to come in and battle and win that job is something that, on top of just his normal personality, something that I think really ingratiated him with his teammates and has allowed him to make a much smoother transition. Because to me, that's always the biggest. I'm not concerned about a veteran quarterback learning the offense at all. I'm not worried about it at all. I'm not worried about him getting on the same page with his teammates because that'll happen by the time we get to the season. They'll have winter workouts, spring, summer workouts, fall camp. You know, Sam Hartman's had 15 practices of 40, you know, and that doesn't include summer workouts. The biggest concern is, does he adapt to the team? Does he get the buy-in from the players that you get from a quarterback that's been through the battles for years with the team?
Right.
That to me is the biggest question. And that's the thing that I wasn't sure of with Sam Hartman, because you never really know. But that as you watch and you hear and you see the engagement that he has with his teammates, you say, okay, the buy-in for Sam Hartman is there, but the buy-in into Sam Hartman from the players is also there. And it's what we see, and it's what I hear from a lot of different sources, that the players embraced him quickly because of the way he came in and because of the way he conducted himself. Not like, I'm freaking Sam Hartman, I'm 19th all time in passing. Recognize, you know, it wasn't like that at all. It's like, hey, I'm here to work, and I'm here to help, help us win a championship. And the players took to him, including the other quarterbacks, took to him really quickly. And that is huge, in my opinion.
I don't think the fan base talks about that enough, though, Brian, in my opinion, right? All they care about, for most part, and this is a generalization, this isn't every Notre Dame fan, this isn't every college football fan in general, but a lot of fans care just about what happens on Saturdays.
Sure.
And I completely get that. Completely get it. But in order to get to Saturdays, your quarterback needs to be the face of your team. We've talked about this before. Whether a quarterback is ready or they aren't, whether they're a first-year player or a sixth-year senior, if they aren't prepared and accepted to be that guy, then you have problems in the locker room. You do, because there is a quarterback, first-year starter, fourth-year starter, whatever, they are the absolute leader of a football team. To call it what you want, right? A true freshman who has to be pressed in the starting position as a quarterback is a leader of a football team. A sixth-year senior who is a starting quarterback of a football team is the leader of your football team, whether you are ready for it or you aren't. And some guys struggle with that. And especially guys struggle with that because we know, well, Antonio Carter that we just had on the show, he could have 2 years to develop those relationships with the team. Sam Hartman has 1 year and he's done. That's it.
Yeah.
You got one season to make your mark with this team. You have one off season to make this team believe in you. That is a fact. Right. So having that smaller window of getting the approval, becoming that leader in a short amount of time, that can be tough, man. It can. Because like you said, Brian, like let's call it, we see this with high schoolers sometimes we go to the college ranks. It's basically a reset, man. It doesn't matter what you did at Wake Forest anymore. It's awesome that what you did and you left a legacy there. But at Notre Dame, you have thrown for 0 yards and 0 touchdowns. Those kids don't care as much about what you did at Wake Forest. We do, because I think that tells what type of player that he is. But when he is in the locker room, he's just another guy. He's a part of the team. And when you kind of clean the slate in the resume and all the great things behind Sam Hartman, the person, has to be accepted by this Notre Dame football team. And it seems like he has, because he went out there day in and day out, and it looks like he won over the team, and he clearly won the starting job. There's no question about that. So
Sam Hartman's not the only transfer that's going to have an impact on this football team. And I think that's the important piece to this. And I think we'll ask a question at the end, but there was a need for secondary help.
Yeah.
And they got it. And the need at safety with Antonio Carter was obvious. They needed a body, and a body that can play. and they got one. They got a kid that can play. And whether it's as a rotational guy, whether he wins a starting job this year, next year, whatever, they got a kid that can play. We'll find out how quickly he can make the transition from the FCS level to the Power 5 level. I think he'll make it fine. We've seen kids like him. We saw the Wells kid at South Carolina make a fast transition. We saw Jared Verse make a very fast transition. If you can play, you can play.
Yes.
And you'll have all summer and all fall camp to get caught up to the speed of the game. And so that part will be there if he's got the tools. And we'll find out if he does. I think he does on film, but we'll find out for sure once he puts the pads on. And so obviously that was important. That was a need from a number standpoint. Yep. Then there is, okay, we have people here, but we would like to upgrade the talent here. And that's where Thomas Harper comes into play, because you'd mentioned that, the aspect of Sam Hartman being able to win over the locker room is not something that gets enough discussion. I'll tell you a guy that doesn't get enough discussion is Thomas Harper.
Yeah.
This was, to me, behind Sam Hartman, the biggest pickup that Notre Dame made in the portal this offseason so far, in my opinion, because Tariq Bracy was so important to the Notre Dame defense last year as the nickel.
Yep.
And I don't know if we talk enough about how important Tariq Bracy was to the Notre Dame defense last year as that nickel. Going into this season with the schedule the way that it is, with USC being a spread it out and pass happy team, with Ohio State being a team that likes to throw it a ton, with Stanford now being a team that's going to spread the field and go tempo and move the ball over the field, Clemson's going to now adopt a lot of those air raid principles that Garrett Riley's brother implements. Now they have their own personalities and their own likes and dislikes as coaches, but they come from the same family tree, so to speak, literally and figuratively, right, from a football standpoint. And so you look at all the different aspects of this, and you've got to be able to line up as a nickel as your base defense. They were able to do that last year with the exception of the USC game because they didn't have Cam Hart or Tariq Bracy, and it cost them. We saw that. It cost them. Thomas Harper being able to come in, and when I first heard about him, I was like, okay, I don't know a lot about him. Open mind, looked at the numbers, good numbers at Oklahoma State. And his despite playing in a league that throws the ball a lot, Ryan, if you look at his numbers, his target numbers and his overall production with what Pro Football Focus looks at was actually better than what Tariq Bracy had last year, right? And so I'm gonna pull those numbers up. So, for example, last year, Tariq Bracy, who again, I thought was a heck of a player for Notre Dame last year. You look at his numbers last season, Ryan, and he was targeted 53 times for 36, allowed 36 catches, 381 yards, and allowed 5 touchdowns and 1 interception. One of the touchdowns he allowed was in the South Carolina game. He allowed 3 against North Carolina. I don't necessarily buy that. I think one of those touchdowns was not on him, and another one was just a phenomenal throw and catch by the quarterback at Drake May and then Josh Downs. You remember that 4th down,
Yes.
That little fade they ran on that 4th down against
catch.
him. It was a great catch, great throw. I thought Tariq did some really nice things for them last year. Then you look at what Thomas Harper did for Oklahoma State last year in a league that throws the ball quite a bit. It's not like it used to be, but still throws the ball quite a bit. Last season at Oklahoma State, Thomas Harper was targeted 32 times, allowed 19 completions, and gave up 185 yards in 7 games. And his completion percentage was about 8, almost 8 points lower than Tariq Bracy's, 67.9 to 59.4. Tariq gave up 10.6 yards per catch, and Thomas only gave up 9.7 yards per catch, and was a pretty sound tackler for them this past season as well. And what those numbers show is there was a lot of balls just caught right in front of him. And he only gave up 1 touchdown all season. That was against Kansas State in the last game that he played, playing with a shoulder injury. And so you look at the numbers, Ryan, and the numbers are pretty impressive in my opinion. When you look at the production, lack of production allowed, the NFL rating that Tariq allowed was 112.2, which isn't great. Thomas Harper's was 73.0. And then the year before as the nickel, he allowed 12 catches on 18 targets in 2021, but he only allowed 70 yards. So it's like a bunch of now screens and bubble screens and hitches that he was driving on and tackling right away. And so I think that's a big part of it too, is his tackling prowess to me is really impressive. His ability to tackle in space is something that really stood out to me. And I think his ability to play in man coverage is something that really fits into this Notre Dame defense. And he does it in a bigger body than Tariq had as well. He's a guy that we don't talk enough about, Ryan, that if he's able to be healthy and make the transition, could have a huge impact on the Notre Dame defense.
It could. And I mean, I think that those numbers are very important too, Brian, because I really hate Pro Football Focus sometimes because I'm just like, why are we counting screens as catches let up by people? But like, that's another conversation for
if it's a no cover zone, it's a no cover zone. It shouldn't count it. You know, if you're playing cover 3 and they complete a 6-yard hitch on you, that's not a completion against me. You know, we're giving them that, whatever. Yeah, I'm with you on that, dude, for real.
Or like a hitch on like cover 4 at the end of a football game. It's like, who cares about that play? But yeah, anyway. So
I'm with
Harper, he's a really interesting player too, Brian, because one, it fills a need at nickel that you don't have a clear answer for at this time, right? Like, you have a couple guys in Clarence Lewis that has played some nickel, right? You have maybe a Jaden Mickey who could play nickel in a pinch if you needed him to, but you don't have a guy that you're comfortable right now saying like that's a high impact nickel cornerback. It's more of just a couple guys that can play nickel if you need them to play nickel. So not only do you get a clear answer at the nickel spot, I think you also strengthen a couple spots with him being there, right? Like he's not a player that is forced to play safety anymore with Antonio Carter there, which we'll talk about, right? But now you strengthen the safety position because you don't have to move a body into the nickel as much. You strengthen the quarterback position because now you could say, hey, Clarence, you could play corner or you can move him to safety. Ryan Barnes, you could focus more on outside or maybe move to safety eventually. Jaden Mickey, you're a full-time outside corner at this point, right? So you don't have to cross-train as much. So that strengthens the corners around you, strengthens the safeties around you. And more than anything, you get a guy that is going to be a clear starting nickel for you in your sub. And you need that player because Tariq Bracy does leave a big hole that we haven't talked about enough this offseason. He was when Notre Dame played its best defense last year, you look at what Tariq Bracy was able to do working in the slot against guys like Jackson Smith and Jigba, Josh Downs to a degree, working in the BYU game where he was playing outside to begin that football game. Very impactful football player. And I think that's what you're going to get from Thomas Harper this year is that there shouldn't be much of any of a drop-off in a position that in today's era of college and NFL, the nickel position has become base defense at this point. Mm-hmm. It has. We haven't seen Notre Dame quite get there yet, but it's going there. It's going to get there unless there's a trend that completely flips the script. So it's a position that you needed, and it's a position that helps strengthen other spots, in my opinion, around it.
I think you said a part right there, Ryan, that I think is important when you look at this transfer class. What's important about this transfer class is it doesn't just impact them and their spots. For example, one of the biggest positives to getting Antonio Carter is the opportunity to just leave Thomas Harper in the slot. You were going to be if you couldn't get a legit transfer safety like Antonio Carter, you're going to be forced to cross train Thomas Harper more than maybe you wanted to. You had to. You were going to have no choice. Otherwise, you're going to be forced to play freshmen who are both coming off injuries. I think that's important. But then the same thing with Thomas Harper. One of the breakouts that I thought we saw for Notre Dame, and we saw it in the scrimmages, we saw it or the practices, we saw it in the blue gold game, and not just with the the interception on the underthrown ball, but I thought his coverage all game, his tackling all game was good, was Jaden Mickey. One of the reasons that Jaden Mickey was able to have a breakout is because they didn't have to train him in the slot this spring. Because now, look, Thomas Harper wasn't in 7-on-7s, or he wasn't in the team stuff, and he wasn't in tackling because he's still coming back from the shoulder injury, but he was doing one-on-ones. He was out there going through drills. He was learning the defense. He just wasn't getting contact in the defense. So you know he's going to be there. And then, of course, you've got now the depth there of Clarence Lewis and Ryan Barnes. You kind of were going to have to maybe play Jaden Mickey a little bit there if you weren't able to, or Chance Tucker there if you weren't able to get a Thomas Harper. So not only does Thomas Harper impact the nickel position, but it now impacts, you don't have to worry about cross-training Jaden Mickey and Christian Gray and some of those younger players because you have that veteran player there. And now, because my concern with Jaden was, I don't know that he's ready to cross-train just yet.
Right.
I want him to really master corner first.
Right.
Then maybe next year he can cross-train if the need is there. So, like, let's just say next year in the spring, Benjamin Morrison's still a dude. Cam Hart goes to the NFL. But Chance Tucker and Christian Gray and Micah Bell just have phenomenal off seasons. You've still got a question mark at nickel. And you say, Jaden can start for us. Christian Gray can start for us, or Chance Tucker can start for us. Well, we're going to be a team in 2024, looking at it from the coach's standpoint, that is still going to be a heavy nickel defense.
Yes.
Well, let's get Jaden, who's a physical player. He's now got 2 years in the weight room under his belt. You know what? Let's put him in the slot now, because we know he's got cornered down now. Or you could do it with like a Chance Tucker. Hey, we know Chance has cornered down now. Let's put him in the slot. And this allows them to get cornered down. That's the key. And I think it's going to be great for Jaden Mickey in his career that he gets to stay a corner and only corner and focus on corner, at least for now. And that doesn't happen if Thomas Harper, to me, doesn't pick Notre Dame. It doesn't happen. It ultimately may have had to happen if Antonio Carter doesn't pick Notre Dame. But the two of them together now allows you to say, okay, I don't need to worry about cross-training Christian Gray. I don't need to worry about cross-training Chance Tucker. I don't need to worry about cross-training Jaden Mickey. I can let them continue to master those corner positions. And I think that's going to have an impact on top of the on-the-field impact that they're going to bring to the table.
Well, and I think both of those players, talking about Carter and on Harper, is that they both have versatility to them, right, Brian? I mean, we talked about that in the Antonio Carter interview, and I know I talked to Antonio about this on the phone, is that Wisconsin wanted him as a pure outside corner. Iowa wanted him as a pure outside corner. Notre Dame wants him as a safety and can do other things in the secondary. Ole Miss wanted him as almost a pure nickel type, like almost like a big nickel type of situation. So there is clearly versatility for a player that is 6'1", 200 pounds, very good tackler, has ball production in the secondary. And then Thomas Harper is a player that, while mostly a nickel, he has played some safety in his career at Oklahoma State. So I'd much rather, because I know people love, like, I think from the recruiting side of things, from the high school route, it's like, oh, awesome, versatility. Like Ben Minnick is a guy that I'm just like, that kid I think could be a safety, but could also play some nickel. He can come down, play some man coverage, do all that type of stuff, right? But as a freshman, I don't want him doing that. You know who I want doing that? Fifth-year senior Antonio Carter. That's who I want doing that. Fifth-year senior Thomas Harper. That's the guys that I want to be versatile guys, because they have literally done it on the college level. For the younger players, and you mentioned Jaden Mickey, he's another example in this conversation, in my opinion, is that I want him to learn to be really good at one thing. And then when he's really good at one thing, then you put something new on his table, on his plates. That is how development happens. That's how versatility is brought out in players. So I think that bringing in those couple of guys is also a big boost in versatility, man. Like, there's opportunities to get both those guys on the field in multiple spots at time during a football game as well. So I just think that the versatility of the secondary is also going to be one where it's a little more flexible than it was even last year. Because Thomas Harper, as a safety, let's say you're running some umbrella coverage, for instance, right? And you want to rotate him back to some, working from depth a little bit. You can do that stuff now. But with Tariq Bracy, I don't want to do that with Tariq. Tariq's a pure slot guy. Like, he's going to play in the slot. That's what he's going to do for you at Notre Dame. He's going to play outside at times when you need him to. I think the versatility aspect is another area that has really improved on this football team in the secondary. How great is it going to be is a question that remains unanswered. Right. But if nothing else, I think versatility has taken a big jump from last season for Notre Dame, in my opinion, in the secondary.
I think what the transfers have done, Ryan, more than anything, is it is raised the odds that the secondary doesn't take a step back. At the very least, it's going to be as good as it was last year. And it was pretty good last year. I mean, it wasn't great across the board. The safety play wasn't great, but the safety play wasn't bad. They just don't make a lot of plays. But you know what the safeties did not do last year? Give up a lot of bad plays. And that matters. But they in order to beat USC, Xavier Watts needs to intercept that pass instead of just breaking it up off the hash, right? And those are the things you need to see more of. I think he brings that to the table. We started to see flashes of that late last year. I expect Xavier to take another jump, but there wasn't a lot of other playmaking production. I don't need the nickel to be a playmaker as far as like a bunch of breakups. It's just not the nature of that position, Ryan. But you need your safeties to be more playmakers, and they didn't have that last year. So that's going to be the question mark about can the secondary take a jump? Two things are going to factor into that. Number one, obviously, or three. Number one is general good health. That's always important. Sure. Number two, can Cam Hart build on the way he ended last season? If Cam Hart can pick up where he left off last season, he's going to be really good. And I hope he sees all the evaluations of him from him, and I hope he uses it as fuel. Because did you see the new thing from On3 where they grade the players?
Duos or whatever?
No. There's two things. That was from Pro Football Focus.
Gotcha.
So On3 has this new thing where they have next to on a player's card, next to his as a recruit, but they also grade you like as a player. And so like they went through, apparently, according to Pro Football Focus, according to On3, North Carolina has more, and Miami has 3 times as more 4-star players on their rosters Notre Dame does. Notre Dame has 4 and 5-star players on their roster. That's it. Everybody else is a 3-star on their roster for Notre Dame. Okay. This is according to Pro Football.
They're grading their current value.
They're grading players. So like Joe Walt's like the number 9 player in the country.
Got it. Okay.
And Benjamin Morrison's like 29th. They did have 2 5-stars. So 2 5-stars and 3 4-stars. That's it. Just those guys. Everybody else was a 3-star. And so when you look at Cam Hart, they graded Cam Hart like very unfavorably on that, which I just found really, really fascinating. And so and then you read the Pro Football Focus where they called him a complimentary player.
Yeah, you said that one.
Tell me you don't watch Notre Dame without telling me you don't watch Notre Dame, right? Like, how are you going to – like, do you ever ask yourselves, why did Benjamin Morrison have so many interceptions late in the season? Do you ever ask yourself this question?
Because they weren't throwing.
I'm saying that rhetorically to you. I'm talking to the outsiders. It's because teams kept throwing at him. Do you know why they kept throwing at him? Because the alternative was Cam Hart and throwing to guys who were covered, and so – It is fascinating when you see that. I hope he takes that disrespect and use it to fuel him. But the third thing, before I get too far off track, third thing is going to be, can the safeties become more productive on the ball?
Sure.
That's going to be a key. You have to force more incompletions. That's going to be a big part of Notre Dame's defensive strategy this year, Ryan. And it is something that when I look at this football team and I look at kind of the last couple years, they were the playoff year, they were at 56.9, the 2018 playoff team. In 2019, they were at 54.3 completion percentage, 58 in the 2020 season. And then they jumped up to 60.8 the year before, but they did have 15 interceptions compared to just 13 touchdowns allowed. Last year, they went down a little bit, but 58.7 is still a little higher than I would like it to be. But they gave up 20 touchdown passes and only had 10 interceptions. That's not good. That's not where you want to be. And in some of the bigger games you had last year, you allowed quarterbacks to complete passes at a very high level. Caleb Williams completed 18 of 22 passes, way too high. CJ Stroud didn't complete a lot of passes down the field. He was only 6.6 yards per attempt, but he completed 70.6% of his passes. And Marshall's quarterback completed 16 of 21 for 76.2%. And Stanford's quarterback completed 26 of 39 passes for a 66.7 completion percentage, which was one of his better outputs of the season. And so when you look at that and you say the 2 games before that game, Stanford completed 58.8 and 57.9, and the next 5 games after that, they went 56.9, 48.4, 59.5, 48% against Utah. It wasn't until Cal, the second to last game of the year, that they completed over 60% again. Notre Dame 66.7, third best output they had all season, behind Colgate and BYU.
Oh,
so
fighting toothpaste, man.
Yeah, toothpaste. Not really where you want to be. and so they've got to force more incompletions, and a big part of that comes from the safety position. Because if you actually look at what I had just said to you, the Notre Dame defense as a whole allowed over almost 50. It was a 58.7% completion rate. If you look at the Pro Football Focus numbers, right, Ryan? And I know that we don't necessarily love those. They have Notre Dame down to 63.6% allowed. Because of what you said, they count. There's just it's just a weird. I don't know how they could allow it. Where it's whatever. But here's what they have. Benjamin Morrison only allowed 43.1% completions.
Yep.
Cam Hart only allowed 50%. For context, Julian Love was well over 50% during his All-American year. So your two starting cornerbacks allowed well under 50% completion rate. That's very good. Here's the problem. The linebackers gave up a very high percentage, but Ramon Henderson was 81.8. DJ Brown was 68.2. Clarence Lewis is 66.7. Brandon Joseph was 64. You know the one guy that held opponents to under 50% completion percent at safety? It's rhetorical because the only guy left, Xavier Watts. He was at 46.7. They only completed 8 of 17 on him. And so you hope that this young man, Antonio Carter, can come in and provide an improvement there. Thomas Harper was 8 points better than what Tariq Bracy was last year, according to Pro Football Focus. If he can carry that into Notre Dame, and then all of a sudden you start getting a little bit more production from the safety position, now all of a sudden teams are less efficient throwing the football. And that's huge. That helps your run game. That helps your pass game. It helps all of it. So those are the three keys, Ryan. And I believe that the transfers are going to potentially have a big role in that, because here's the deal. If Antonio Carter is who we hope he is, the only way that you can justify not playing him more than Ramon Henderson and DJ Brown is if those guys play better than they did last year.
Yes.
And that's going to be the important part of it. And that's what you start getting a little bit fired up about, is the only way that Clarence Lewis is going to justify playing as many snaps as he did last year is if he plays better. Yeah. And so all of it factors in because you have the numbers now. Clarence Lewis doesn't have to play now. You don't have to play all four of your safeties now. You don't have to play a lot of the guys that struggled last year. If they're going to play again, it's because they've improved, or at least it better be because they've improved. And that's where you start getting a little bit fired up about what the secondary can be, in my opinion, Ryan.
Well, I think that the two safety spots and then the nickel cornerback spot for me, Brian, they're going to be put into a lot of really good situations, because what does having two potential lockdown corners do for you? It's the fact that you now have to obviously attack the middle of the field more, which in theory is not always a great idea because there's more people in the middle of the field, right? There's more football players in the middle field naturally. And also they're going to get forced to secondary parts of their progressions. They're not going to be just some, quick speed outs, quick hitches, like just stuff that's going to be 3-step drop outs, 1 step out of the shotgun outs, get the ball out quick. They're going to get forced into what's your second read, third read, trying to attack the middle of the field. All those things can be very, I want to call it, there's a lot of opportunity. So opportunistic is what I can call the middle of the defense for Notre Dame this year. They weren't as opportunistic as they needed to be in 2022. You mentioned the 6 pass breakups. That was one thing that we thought Brandon Joseph was going to bring to the team, that he would have, he had, what did he have? 9 interceptions the previous 2 years at Northwestern. You were kind of hoping that he would have been kind of a ball hawk in the middle of the defense and be able to create some of those impact plays. Obviously, he wasn't to a high degree. He only had 1 interception for Notre Dame. Should have been a second against Syracuse, but again, that's a conversation for a different day. But regardless, is that the safeties and nickel spot in 2023 are going to get opportunities. They are. Because you know who they're not going to want to throw at? Freshman All-American Benjamin Morrison. And they're not going to want to throw at the guy that's 6'2.5" and probably going to run in the 4.4s and the 40 and is going to be the NFL next year. Like, you're not going to throw at those guys. And if you are going to get opportunities, you have to take advantage of it. And Notre Dame safeties, and I think the middle of the defense just didn't take advantage of as many opportunities as they needed to in 2022. That needs to change in 2023, because where do interceptions happen? I mentioned middle of the field, but it's also the guys that have their eyes back to the line of scrimmage. There's going to be a lot of times where the safeties have their eyes back to the line of scrimmage and everybody else in front is in man coverage. And they're going to be able to kind of stop the short to intermediate quick separation stuff. Guys like Antonio Carter, Xavier Watts, Ramon Henderson, DJ Brown, there needs to be an emphasis to create more impactful plays, getting your hands on the football and forcing turnovers. That was an area that Notre Dame struggled with throughout most of the season last year. I mean, what was it like the first 4 or 5 games of the season? Notre Dame didn't force a single turnover. I think the first 4 or 5 games last year.
They didn't.
Their
first turnover came against BYU.
Yeah.
I mean, the Tariq Bracy interception. They forced a turnover, a forced fumble. They didn't get their first interception until the BYU game. Their first turnover was a fumble against North Carolina. I believe it was late in the game, if I remember correctly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it took a while.
It was ugly,
man. It took a while.
And in this game, and in today's game, where it just seems like offenses are scoring at such a high level, and they're trying to open the field, and they're trying to create explosive plays at a high, just an incredibly high rate. Limiting possessions is a big thing.
Yeah.
It could be a really big thing because with how fast some of these teams go now, they're trying to get as many offensive possessions as possible. Because what is more offensive possessions, the more opportunity to score. That's basic law of averages, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that eliminating some possessions and forcing turnovers is big with how the game is played today. And Notre Dame needs to benefit off of that more than they have in the past, especially last year specifically.
Absolutely. And tackling is a big part of that limiting possessions, Ryan, because it's when a guy catches a ball on 3rd and 4 and you hit him at 3 yards, make him stop at 3 yards, not, or maybe like a 3rd and 6 or 3rd and 7, and you stop him short. You got to stop him short. Yep. Hitting a ball carrier at, a yard behind the sticks, make sure he does not run you over or go forward. And then missed tackles where a 3rd and 5 conversion of 6-yard gain turns into a 25-yard gain. Those are the things that this unit can't allow.
Do you remember the playoff game last year between TCU and Michigan with Quentin Johnson on that little drag? They had him stopped on 3rd and whatever it was, and he broke the tackle and he went for a touchdown, which was a big moment in that football game. Like those moments matter, man. They really do.
Yep.
I agree that it's not always one play that determines a football game, right? It's a series of plays, but those plays are backbreakers, man. They are, and that we literally saw that in one of the playoff games last year.
Yeah. That's something that you're going to see too, Ryan, is if you look at like the playoff team in 2018 and you look at the yards after contact that year, they had 1,193 yards after contact that year on, let me see here, 276 completions. This past year, they allowed 1,274 yards after contact, right? So it's more this year. So it's about 83 more yards. They had 231 completions. That was 45 fewer completions this year, but still gave up over 70 more yards after contact because these weren't as good tacklers. And that's a big part of it. And also getting beat in space where they're catching and running. Those are things you have to limit. And that's where I think Thomas Harper, who I felt was a quality, I mean, he's not Antonio Carter as a tackler, but he's a good sound tackler in space. He's good in space on film. You hope that those areas can really improve. And that's an area where they need to improve. And that's where I think this transfer class is going to have a much bigger impact than maybe we're talking about, because rightfully so, we're spending a lot of our focus on Sam Hartman, understandably.
We should, yeah.
But that's an area where they could have an even bigger impact. Because imagine if Sam Hartman can play with a better defense than what Drew Pine and Tyler Buckner had last year. Not the defense was bad. The defense did not cost you the Stanford game. They held them to 16 points. That was on the offense. The defense gave up 19 points to Marshall. Heck, the defense only gave up 21 points to Ohio State. The defense isn't why you lost those games. I'm not saying that. I am saying, however, that if the defense can make some stops and force some turnovers and like the Ohio State game, okay, I don't blame the defense for that game. Defense, I thought, played their butts off. They didn't finish in the fourth quarter. But imagine if they could have maybe given the offense a short field when the offense is sputtering, or not allowed Ohio State to drive and get into field goal range and miss a field goal where then Notre Dame starts their drive way back in Ohio State territory, right? I mean, that's the thing that I'm talking about is, give them a short, hey, we're struggling today. We need you to give us a short field. Yeah. Well, guess what? That happened against Syracuse, and the sputtering offense was able to be part of a 40-something point outburst because they got short fields. You had the pick six. And because, the pick six against Syracuse was in game, 7 or 8 last year, Ryan? Let me look it up. It was 4, 5, 6, 7. It was game 8.
Yeah.
That was Notre Dame's second interception of the season. That's it.
Wild.
That's it. Game 8.
Yeah.
Now they did. Here's where I start getting a little optimistic. They had 1 interception in the first 7 games. In the last 6 games, they had 9,
which is great. Yeah.
So we can't ignore that if we're going to talk about how bad it was. I mean, you can't ignore the fact that they had 2 against Syracuse, 2 against Clemson, 1 against Navy. And that was a great interception, by the way, by Clarence Lewis in that game. Do you remember that? They were trying to run that crosser, and he jumped it and undercut it. 3 against Boston College, and then 1 against South Carolina.
Should have been another against Syracuse that was wiped out too.
Yes, yeah. So that was right by Brandon Joseph as well.
That was the best play of the season he made, in my opinion. Man. That was a great interception.
Oh yeah. So, and then, I think they didn't have one against Syracuse or against USC, but Xavier should have had one, in my opinion, in that game coming off the hash. So if you can continue that trend into this season, then all of a sudden, Ryan, you start talking about, all right, that's going to be a much more productive defense, because if you have the same rate in the regular season next year that they had in the last 6 games this year, that's 18 interceptions in the regular season compared to 9 this year. That helps the offense a ton.
Yep.
It does. And I think that's something that you look at and say that could have an impact. And I think these guys can have an impact on it. But here's somebody else that I think can have an impact on that. Notre Dame needs to get more pass rush from their field end position. That's what they call it now. So we're going to have to get used to some new names. Field end is what they now call the big end. X is what they now call the W. Z is what they call the X. And F is what they call the Z. So it's actually more in line with what normal football jargon is, to be honest with you, offensively at least. But the field end, the big end, it was a power play. It was a pure power player. And I thought Riley Mills was solid there for what they asked him to do. I believe, however, that to really have the kind of impact you need to have against the offenses that they're going to play, because this is what it's about, Ryan. It's about, you got to build your defense to fit the teams you're actually going to play, not who you may want to be in your own head. And I think that was a big reason why they pursued Javonte Jean-Baptiste, and why they because a lot of people said, we're going to play him a Viper, right? I'm like, no, field end. What, does he really fit what you have had there? No, he doesn't, which is exactly the point.
Yeah.
You don't need a 290-pound big end against Ohio State. You don't need that against USC. You don't need, and I think you might need it a little bit more against Ohio State this year, but there's other things you can do, because I think Ohio State's going to be a more balanced team this year. I do. I think that they're going to not rely on the quarterback as much as they did last year. At least if they're smart, they won't rely on the quarterback as much as they did last year. But you're still going to be a nickel team. When you talk about playing USC, you're going to need more speed on the front. And same thing with Clemson and Stanford and a lot of the top teams that you're going to play. And same thing when you get to the postseason. You can adjust to be big if you need to. If they're going in to play Michigan in the playoff, for example, they can easily bump Riley Mills outside and play him at big end on 1st and 10 if they need to, right? But the point is, you have to get more pass rush from that spot. You have to, especially against the 3 teams that are going to determine whether or not you're a playoff team next year: Ohio State, USC, and Clemson. And Javonte Jean-Baptiste, we got to see what he brings to the table as a run defender. That's a question mark for me, because he wasn't in those situations a ton. He was okay against the run at Ohio State, not great, but what he definitely did last year and what he showed us this spring, Ryan, is that kid can get after the quarterback. That was a another underrated addition for Notre Dame to this defense, because they've got big. I mean, Nana can set the edge and play against the run, and they've got guys that can do that. They needed a kid that could get after the quarterback, and I think that this could end up being their best just pass rusher at field end in a number of years, to be completely honest with you, Ryan, for what he brings to the table. I mean, if you go look at his pressure rates last year per snap, it's tremendous.
Yeah.
And it was higher, I believe, if I remember correctly. Didn't we look this up? It was higher than what Will Anderson's was in 2021.
Yeah.
And it was definitely higher than Isaiah Foskey the last 2 years. So that's a very important piece to this as well, Ryan, that I don't know if we're talking enough about. Part of it is because we didn't see him and Thomas Harper in the spring game.
It's fair.
So it's out of sight, out of mind. I get it. This isn't a criticism of our listeners. I get it. We haven't talked about him a lot either. You know, I mean, for the same reason. But I think this is what makes it very important. None of these guys are going to come in my opinion, be All-Americans next year. I'm not asking Javonte Jean-Baptiste to come in and be a 12-sack dude. I'm not asking that. I don't need him to do that. If he does it, great. But that's not what we're asking him to do. We're not asking Thomas Harper to come in and be the best nickel in America, and we're not asking Antonio Carter to come in and be the next Harrison Smith or Kyle Hamilton from 2020 version of Kyle Hamilton. but come in and add a niche, add a trait we don't have when you're looking at it from the Notre Dame standpoint. And that, to me, I think nobody on the defensive portal guys adds more to the game that they lacked at that position than the Javonte Jean-Baptiste as a
Very
pass
interesting.
rusher.
It's very interesting because, I mean, why do you want to upgrade the secondary from last year? It's because of the teams you're playing, right? Why do you want to upgrade the pass rush? Because of the teams that you're playing. One great quote that I heard, I think it was a former general manager, it was a former scout. Someone asked them about, setting goals before the season. And one thing he talked about was he used to design and construct his roster to win the division, right? Not to win Super Bowls. You have to win your division. And I think that you look at that same way in college football of like, we talk about playoff berths so much, right, Brian? We talk about winning championships. What do you have to do before you get there? You have to win your schedule, man. You got to win the schedule. And I think when you look at the schedule now with how it's formulated, USC, with the North Carolinas of the world, with Robert Anae obviously now at NC State, with Stanford and Trent and Troy Taylor as their new head coach, there is going to be a lot of spread teams on the schedule for Notre Dame in 2023. And the way you counteract that is we talked about the secondary already. But you can't have a one-note pass rush or a underwhelming pass rush against those types of teams. You are going to have to really pressure at a high rate because there are some good quarterbacks on the schedule for Notre Dame. There are some good offenses on the schedule for Notre Dame. You are going to have to press them and then force those mistakes. How do you create turnovers? Pressure. Forcing mistakes. That's how you create turnovers as well. Talking about what the front is able to do. So Javonte Jean-Baptiste, again, you at least need him to be productive. You need him to have, and again, I think you said it perfectly. You don't have to be a 12 sacks in 2023 guy, but if you can get to 6 and still keep a high win rate and still get a decent amount of pressures, that's what you need from Javonte, because then you could say, okay, now we can mix and match the Nana Osapa-Mensahs, maybe moving Riley Mills outside at times. Maybe one of the young, strong side field ends is able to get into the crack the rotation and get some burn at some points. Then that's great. But Javonte Jean-Baptiste is a kid that we have seen some production on the college level. Now he needs to see it on a higher volume, obviously. But you are going to need to, forget the field end, boundary end for a second. When you're in the fourth quarter against USC and they're trying to drive down and win the football game, the number one priority is going to be to get after Caleb Williams. That's the priority. And it's all hands on deck at that point and being able to get to him. So I think Javonte Jean-Baptiste is a big part of this team. I think that strong side end, field ends, whatever you want to call it, they need to get impact out of that position. Not only just sacks, but tackle for loss numbers. You need to be more impactful. Right. And they just weren't that impactful in 2022. They were bad, but just not as impactful as you need to be.
You're a part that we definitely don't talk about because they weren't even on campus this summer too. Is they did have another special teams impact on for them this year. Ben Krim, the punter from Penn, I believe was an all Ivy League guy last year. Spencer Sanders from South Florida had Schrader. Spencer Sanders is
you love Spencer Sanders.
It's also we had a kicker on a team that I coached on whose name was Spencer Sanders.
Gotcha.
Spencer Saunders, excuse me, was his name actually. So that's why I keep jacking that one up. But he's a guy that's had some success as a place kicker. Has also made some kicks in some big venues. He went 9 of 13 last year. Had I believe a 50. Didn't he have a 50? I think a 50-yard field goal against Florida last year.
Yes,
I believe.
Yep.
So and he's a guy that missed 2 of his first 4 and then made 8 of his last 9 as a field goal kicker this past season, and he was 11 of 13 the year before that. So he's a guy that's got very good production. He's played for a long time, so he's got a lot of experience under his belt. So you should be good there. His leg is not quite as strong as Blake Grupe's, but from what I've seen, he seems to have a pretty accurate leg. And I think that to me is a little bit more important. Blake Grupe could absolutely destroy the football, which is shocking when you consider how small he is, but you didn't know where it was going to go. That was the only concern.
I always loved when Blake Grupe was listed at 150 pounds. I'm like, there's no way that young man is 150 pounds.
Yeah,
but
he's a little dude, but he has an incredibly powerful arm.
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember seeing him in spring practice. I think before this past season, and you just heard the ball go off his foot, and you're just like, that's a little bit different than going off of Harrison Leonard's foot, for instance. Like, it just sounds different.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's going to be an impact there. And then there's a good special teams player that is transferring in, and he's more of a special teams guy. He's not going to be on scholarship, but that's Cole Aubrey, who I think had about 3.5 sacks, 6 tackles for loss, something like that at Princeton last year as sort of an edge rusher. He's not coming to Notre Dame to necessarily be that. He's coming to Notre Dame to be more of a special teams guy. So there will also be some special teams impact for Notre Dame and the transfer portal this year as well, Ryan. But overall, I look at this like I'm excited about this football team this year. But if you took all the transfers away, I don't have the same level of excitement. And it's not just because of Hartman at quarterback, because I'm very high on Tyler Buckner as a player. And I would imagine that if they weren't going to bring in a transfer portal guy and they just said, hey, Drew and Tyler, you guys are going to battle it out next year and all that kind of stuff. And Drew probably stays and they compete and all that other kind of good stuff. But, to me, it's more about just the entirety of it. I don't know how I would feel about, is the defense going to be better to go out there and be that kind of team? Are they going to be able to improve in the secondary with the issues and numbers at safety? What's nickel looking like now? Is it Clarence Lewis? Is that the guy? I mean, is that who we're going to roll with? Okay, he did okay there at the end of the year, but it doesn't necessarily have me super, super fired up and those type of things. But, man, I would not. And then, we talked about, and we didn't mention this when we were talking about it, but we were referring to the impact that certain players are having, not just on themselves, but around them. You'd have a much harder time justifying moving Riley Mills inside the 3 technique if you don't get Javonte Jean-Baptiste. Much tougher sell, especially Alexander Ahrensberger walking away from football to go to medical school, which is a decision I completely support. When I say walking away, it made it sound like I don't mean that as a negative at all. I mean, the young man is not an NFL football player. He has a chance to go to medical school. Bro, take it. You know what I mean? But anyway, that's big as well, because now I actually think the 3 technique is going to be better than it was last year, in my opinion. I mean,
I think so too.
Jason Adamiola just did not take that step last year. And part of it, he played with some injuries and things like that, but he just never took that leap from 2020. He just never made that jump. You're going to have a bigger body there now. Riley's taller, longer, thicker, more powerful, and hopefully can be more productive. But you're going to be bigger inside. You'd have had a hard time justifying that move, Ryan, if Javonte Jean-Baptiste doesn't come. And I think that's a big part of this transfer portal stuff too, is, Sam Hartman makes the receivers better.
Yes.
He makes the running game better. Javonte Jean-Baptiste allows you to move Riley Mills inside, and now you're feeling really good about the inside of your defensive line, or at least the potential of the inside of your defensive line.
And you don't have to think about moving Thomas Harper to safety anymore now. With Antonio
Exactly.
Carter in the fold.
Exactly. And with Thomas Harper, you don't have to worry about moving Chance Tucker or Jaden Mickey inside to the slot. So there's a lot of impact in that regard too, that I don't know if I'd be feeling the same way about this football team if not for the transfer portal. And even if they only got Sam Hartman, I'd say, okay, that's a great pickup. But I got some questions about the defense.
Yeah.
I'm excited about what this transfer portal class brings to the table. There's a lot of value, in my opinion. I'll say this: they did not hit the portal with the volume that a lot of teams do. They're more in line with what Bama and especially Georgia and Ohio State are doing.
Sure.
Georgia and Ohio State are taking we'll take the conversation here, Ryan. How should Notre Dame approach the portal? Should they look at it as just go out and get a bunch of guys and make sure, or should it be strategic every year, finding needs that we have? And then if there's the occasional impact player like a Sam Hartman, then you go get them. Or if a position is good but not good enough, maybe we go out and get a guy, we add some depth, we find this is a hole. We have a hole. We think that there's a transition between Tariq Bracy and whoever the next nickel is going to be, whether it's Micah Bell or Christian Gray or Jaden Mickey or Chance Tucker, whoever that's going to be. But we need a bridge. Thomas Harper's the bridge. Javonte Jean-Baptiste. You know, you think that there's a chance for you to have some really good big ends down the road, whether it's Aiden Gobira, maybe Tyson Ford can go back outside, whether it's your incoming freshman, Boubacar and Armel Mukam and Brennan Vernon, but you needed a bridge. Yep. And Javonte gives you that bridge. And there's a lot of that in this class, Ryan, in this portal class. And so Notre Dame is choosing to go more of the Georgia-Ohio State route when it comes to the portal. Now, those teams went to the portal as well, but it's not with the volume that you're seeing from some teams, especially like the USC, for example. They're not hitting the portal with that kind of volume. They're being strategic. They're looking for ways that they can improve their football team and things along those lines. But I'm looking at Ohio State right now. Ohio State landed 8 transfers. One of them, I believe, is a long snapper. Yes, one of them is a long snapper. Yeah,
actually more than I thought they did.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, they brought in one guy to be a backup quarterback, Tristan Gebbia. That's, I mean, that's, you know, the one of them's a long snapper. They signed, and then they signed a couple guys late because of struggles that they had in the spring on the offensive line. But they brought in Tywone Malone, Lorenzo Styles, Josh Simmons, Jahad Carter, which is a good pickup, by the way. Davidson Inbenosen, who's a good player from Ole Miss, is originally from Jersey, and then Victor Cutler and Tristan Gebbia. So not a lot of volume there, especially when you consider some of those guys were brought in to simply be backups, right? Yeah. Then you look at what Georgia's doing, and again, Georgia's a team that's losing a lot more transfers than they're getting in. Georgia signed 4 transfers, including one today. They landed one today, Lyneth Whitehead, a running back from Tennessee. Huh? They landed Smoke Bowie, Ra Thomas, who's from Mississippi State, and Dominic Lovett from Missouri. Four kids, a corner, a running back, 2 receivers, because they had needs. They brought in a really good freshman receiver class. Love Tyler Williams. He's one of my favorite receivers in the 2023 class. But there needed to be a bridge, especially after they lost the other kid to Texas, right? And so Mitchell. Right. Yeah. And so you needed a bridge, and they went out and got a bridge. They got good football players, but it's not volume. They're choosing to still go the route of high school development. And at the end of the day, I know there's going to be Notre Dame fans that don't agree with me on this, but I actually believe the way that Notre Dame attacked the portal this offseason is absolutely the path. Bama, by the way, signed 5 portal kids.
So not much either. Yeah.
Not much either. And Clemson, I don't think, did they get any?
I don't even usually dip into much.
They got one, Paul Tyson, a backup quarterback. They brought a guy in to be a backup quarterback.
Oh, Paul Tyson's still around, huh?
Yeah, I know, right?
No idea.
So you're seeing the top programs, in my opinion, especially those that have some stability, not going to the portal. Some teams had to. Like, I don't fault Oklahoma for bringing in 15 transfers. I don't. Right. They needed to, they got punters and some, non guys like that, but they needed to rebuild their depth chart and rebuild their culture. I didn't even have a problem with USC doing it in year 1, but I still don't know, and I still don't believe that the true path to building a championship team is to bring in 15 to 20 new kids every year in the portal. I don't think that's the way to go. Michigan's another team, Ryan, that is embracing the portal, but doing so in a much more targeted manner.
Yes.
Michigan brought in 8 portal kids. One of them is a kicker, right? I mean, so another's a backup quarterback that is meant to be nothing but a backup quarterback in Jack Tuttle. So they're not. Tuttle. Yeah. So again, the best teams in college football, in my opinion, the best programs are not going to the portal to remake their roster. Right. They're going to the portal to bridge gaps between younger players or to fill needs so they can keep the thing rolling. And I think that's the way to go. And I feel like that's what Notre Dame has to be. Notre Dame is just not going to be a team that's going to be able to remake their roster every single year with transfers. Right. And so why try? But I do feel like this offseason, more than last year, they really went into it with the mindset of, we're going to be really targeted and really clear and specific about what we're going to look for as a player and as a person. That was huge. And one of the things that I was told by a couple really good sources on this, that if they were adamant with all the quarterbacks up front, we're not talking NIL with you. Look, if you're the quarterback at Notre Dame, there's going to be NIL opportunities, but we're not getting into that, because if you're going to come here, you're going to come here because we want to win a national championship.
Sure.
And some of the guys they reached out to, that didn't fly, and that told Notre Dame exactly what they needed to know about that guy. That guy's in the portal because he wants a payout. He ain't leading us to a championship, right? Caleb Williams is going to get NIL money no matter where he went. He went to USC to play for Lincoln Riley and to do what they were going to do at USC. They need that. They need the right type of person, because we saw them land an All-American last year that didn't come in and he wasn't about that life, that brotherhood. It was about, what do I got to do for me?
Right.
And you could see it at the pro day. It was obvious at the pro day that was the case, as well as what we saw in the field. So I think Notre Dame's, the way that they went about the portal this offseason is the blueprint for what it needs to be moving forward for Notre Dame. It's the blueprint that has worked at Georgia, who had 0 transfer starters last year, right? It's the blueprint that Ohio State is using. It's the blueprint that Michigan is using. It's the blueprint that Penn State is using. Penn State's another team that's not going out and bringing in 1 million transfers. I think the best teams are the teams that are still going to recruit and develop high school players and then use the portal. Penn State had 3 portal additions this year. That's the way to go for me, is to bring in those, is to be that way. And I think this is the way that Notre Dame needs to go about it. I thought this is the absolute, if they can repeat this every offseason, Ryan, 4 to 5 kids. And we didn't even talk about Caleb Smith, who, he came in and got beat out and ends up, retiring from football. But this is the way to go. Targeted, getting the right type of character people that are also good football players, but filling needs and bridging gaps between where you are now and your young players. I think Notre Dame used it very wisely, very wisely.
Well, I think that the use of the transfer portal is a really nice indicator of program health, in my opinion. I mean, what do all the programs that you just talked about have in common, Brian? They win every single year, right? They're competing for championships every single year, for playoff opportunities every single year. And they recruit at a high level for the most part. Michigan hasn't recruited the best at high school over the last couple of years, but this year they're recruiting at a much higher level from the high school route perspective. Those teams don't need to fill holes, because you know why? Because they're building a really good program and players don't want to leave that much. Like, that's kind of where it comes down to. The guys that have to recycle so often are the teams that can't hold on to players, that aren't winning consistently, that aren't promising delivering what they're promising in the recruiting process. So I think the health of the football programs is really mirrored by what their activity in the portal can be. And then also, I think every team is very different. And for Notre Dame, you can't pull from every player like some programs can, right? Like Colorado can all promise whatever they want to promise, and they can bring in this former 5-star, this first-year player, this 5th-year player, and everything in between. Notre Dame, for the most part, is going to be relegated to graduate transfers that are going to have 1 year of eligibility, most likely moving forward, because now we're getting further and further away from 2020, where you get that free year, so you can have like 2 red shirts, basically. We're going to get more into the situation where the Antonio Carters of the world that are graduates but have 2 years of eligibility, that's going to become more and more of a rarity moving forward, because we're going to start getting rid of that COVID year. Like, that thing's going to be out of the door. We don't have to talk about that extra COVID year very soon. I think 2026 is when we don't have to talk about that anymore. Right. So that's gonna, it's crazy, man. It is crazy, but like literally, like we're still gonna, for a couple years, we're gonna be like, that kid has a 6 year of eligibility because he still has the COVID year. He was there in 2020. Right. So you look at that and I say, moving forward with the limited pool that Notre Dame can pull from in general, the graduate transfer players and the players that also aren't big NIL kids that want payouts. In that pool, I look at that and I say, Notre Dame has to be selective. If you're not selective, then you're doing it wrong, in my opinion, because you just can't pull from the same pool as everybody else in general. And you're recruiting at a high level in the recruiting side of things. So I don't think that it doesn't make sense for Notre Dame.
I think they could. I think they could recruit a lot more because there's a lot of freshmen that they could go after. Those would be easier kids to get into school. They could bring in a lot. They could start raiding the Ivy Leagues for graduate transfers like they kind of did last year. I mean, they could go more. They could take some gambles. There were some guys this year that had expressed interest in transferring Notre Dame that Notre Dame just didn't think were fits. They could have brought those guys in and tried to figure it out, right? I mean, that's the thing is they could. I think what you're saying, Ryan, is they shouldn't. Am I reading you correctly? You're not saying that they can't. It's that they shouldn't. Notre Dame shouldn't be going to that level. And I think that's the key for Notre Dame is going to be being more targeted for where you're going. Because here's the thing. You're going to lose kids in the portal. Yeah. And that's okay. I'm okay because when you bring guys in, there's going to naturally be a departures out, right? And that's just the nature of it at some positions, not at others. And you're just going to have kids like Logan Diggs who just decide they want to be closer to home or want something different. Lorenzo Styles is going to be in his feelings about whatever, and some guys are going to get not treated well by a position coach and decide they want. I mean, that's part of football everywhere. Right. And Notre Dame's not immune to that. And you're gonna have some guys that you kind of process out. Like, hey man, we love you and all that, and you can stay if you want, but you're not gonna play for us. And some kids are gonna stay. I mean, we've had kids that have chosen to stay. We've heard about kids that have chosen to stay. Others are gonna choose to leave. And so, when you have that, you're gonna have departures. What this means for Notre Dame is you now be strategic. I'd say 4 to 8 is the max where I would go. When you talk about position players is the max of where I would go as far as 8. I think there could be some years where you see that because a couple of those guys are going to be depth players, that kind of thing. 4 to 8 to me is the magic sweet spot for Notre Dame. And if you can find guys that are like Antonio Carter's that have multiple years, that's fine if you're hurting in a position. Right. But you eventually want to get to the point where you are bringing in sort of that one and done type of guy to bridge the gap between that next level. But sometimes that gap bridge needs to be kind of there for a couple years because you may be really young at a position and you don't want to necessarily have to play those guys. But I think if Notre Dame's recruiting the high school level correctly, to your point, Ryan, then moving forward, the deeper we get into the Marcus Freeman era, the less those holes need to be, the less those bridges need to be built. And it's now just about this guy's just too good not for us to go get. Right. Or it's a depth player. And that's going to be part of what Notre Dame is going to do at times as well. So I think those are all aspects of it that I now here's something else I've heard, Ryan. I have heard that Notre Dame's different programs are willing to work with the sports programs when it comes to working with them on transfers. Non-graduate transfer. So I won't be shocked if in future years Notre Dame adds a couple undergraduate transfers compared to we just haven't really seen that. Yeah. Now, that's the intel. This is my opinion. I have a feeling it's going to come with some conditions of we're now relying on you to make sure that the person you're bringing in fits here. Right. Don't bring in some knucklehead that we accept, and then he doesn't go to class and doesn't do things he needs to do because he's trying to go to the NFL. Right. Make sure that if we're going to work with you on this, that you're bringing in people that are going to do the work. And I think that now I won't say anything more than that, but I think that's something that they're going to be looking for is making sure that you got to make some assurance, give us some assurances that you're going to be making sure that when these kids come here, they go to class. And that would be something that I would imagine is going to be part of the conversation. That part's the intel that I've been told is they are going to work with the sports teams to a degree for undergrads. My thought is knowing Notre Dame like I do think there's going to be some conditions to that and some expectations that the football team is going to have to, and the basketball teams are going to have to honor in order to get those kids in. Penn State just got an undergrad transfer, or Notre Dame just got an undergrad transfer from Penn State for the basketball team.
Yeah.
Oh, by the way, Penn State did 6 this year, 3 last year, 6 this year. One of them's a special teamer. So I was incorrect. I was looking at the 2022 class.
Gotcha.
The point being that they will work with them as long as there's a commitment to it. But that guy was a freshman. He was the center that Penn State had last year that Micah Shrewsbury recruit. They can get those guys. They can get freshmen. And I've made this point before, guys that aren't deep into their degrees, they can do that. I think you'll see that a little bit more at Notre Dame, maybe one of those guys, a couple of those guys every couple of years, because now – as you get deeper into the Marcus Freeman era, there's going to be more kids that are at other schools that you had a relationship with that chose another school that may have some buyer's remorse that want to come back after year one that you'd be willing to take. We saw that a little bit with like CJ Williams this year. So I think there's going to be some of that as well too, Ryan, where you can get those freshmen, but it's still going to be targeted. And that's going to be the key is if you can make it targeted and make it smart, that's the way to go. And that's what the top teams are doing. That's what Ohio State's doing. That's what Bama's doing. That's what Georgia's doing. That's what Michigan is doing. That's what Penn State is doing. Brian Kelly's not doing that at LSU. But in fairness, I don't think he had a choice, to be honest with you. He walked into a situation that he needed a culture. It was a dumpster fire. I've said this. LSU fans getting their feelings about it when I say it, but then they justify the portal by saying, well, we only had 30-some. Well, that's kind of a freaking dumpster fire. You only have 30-some scholarship players remaining, wouldn't you say? If he didn't go to the portal last year for numbers, they can't field a team.
Yeah.
And that's not fixed in one offseason. It's going to – so when they went out and got 15 again this year, now the key is going to be what you see from LSU that I'm not sure we're seeing from USC to the same degree is LSU is still doing a lot of high school recruiting.
Right.
And then – okay, they signed their recruiting class, got their commitments in December. Now let's go fill up on the portal where we have our needs.
Yes.
So I think what you're going to see from LSU is next year, I think they're going to bring that down a little. I would expect that they're going to bring that number down a little bit. I'm curious if USC is going to do the same. Roger Dodger's in the chat saying they're going to do that, but we're not seeing them really load up on high school commits right now. You know, I mean, they're targeting top players, but numbers wise, they're not doing anything different, in my opinion, this year from a recruiting standpoint. LSU right now in their high school class, they have 15 kids committed, Ryan. That's only one less than Notre Dame.
Yep.
Then you look at USC. Let me go down here. Where is USC? Let's go to average. USC has 3. USC sitting here. Could you imagine the panic that would be setting in Notre Dame fans if USC only had, or if Notre Dame only had 3 kids committed in their class?
And it's about to be June. Yeah.
The utter meltdown that would be happening amongst Notre Dame fans, rightfully so, if they only had 3 kids committed.
Yeah.
So you can't tell me that they're putting more emphasis on high school recruiting when they've only got 3 commitments with summer recruit. You're telling me they're going to add 20 kids between now and no, they're going to go to the portal again. They're going to bring in highly ranked kids. June's a big month for everybody. June's always a big month for everybody. Yeah. But you don't go from 3 to 25 of high school recruits when you're sitting here in May, right? They're going to do what they did last year, 12 to 15 high school kids, and then the rest is going to be portal. I don't know if that's sustainable. Where if you look at LSU, they've already got 15 kids committed. They're trying to find, I think, that sweet spot. It's just their roster was in a situation where they couldn't avoid the portal, massive numbers in the portal for 2 years. They had to go there. And now we'll see if they can start getting back to a little bit more of a healthy, 5 to 8 type of thing moving forward. Because I still think the pathway that we're seeing right now, Ryan, and I also think we're seeing some of these teams that did go portal heavy paying the price in year 2. Michigan State's an example. Teams that had a lot of portal guys come in, have success, and then they couldn't replicate that transfer portal success a year later. It's harder to keep a culture, build and sustain a culture if you're constantly bringing in new guys into that who are not there for necessarily the long haul. They're older guys. That's to me a challenge. Where it's a lot easier to bring in 5, 6 guys that have to then buy into the culture as opposed to 25% of your roster or 15% of your roster is new dudes. And really it's more than that when you consider also the high school part of it. So if you're bringing in 15 portal guys and 15 high school guys. And Ryan, that's creeping up to, that's over 30% of your roster of new dudes. It's hard to keep your culture. Yeah. It's hard to build and establish and maintain a culture that way.
Yep.
And, you can get away with it for a couple of years when you're a new coach, but eventually you're going to have to start bringing in high school kids. And I think that's what the top programs are doing, Ryan. And I think that's going to continue.
I mean, I think at the baseline too, Brian, even even aside from just generally building a program and a camaraderie and an atmosphere, is that the best teams don't have a ton of needs, right? Like there's just not a lot of needs on the roster. Like Georgia doesn't have a lot of needs. You know why? Because they've built a roster. Alabama has built a roster. That's it. They just.
But let's be honest. If Georgia wanted to go into the portal and upgrade, they could get 15, 20 guys if they wanted to, easily.
Oh,
easily.
No, like everybody would want to go to Georgia if they could. Yeah. Right.
Same with Bama. Same with Ohio State. So you could be more successful there if you wanted to. You could raid those things and get those. Hey, this guy's would give us a big, a somewhat upgrade.
But
I think what you're looking for is big upgrades and depth is what you're seeing. Ohio State had a need for a second corner this year. They had to go get the Davidson out of the portal, in my opinion. That was an area where they had Notre Dame needed a quarterback in the portal this year. They needed secondary help. So there still are some areas where your needs, but your needs, the smaller, the fewer amount of needs that you have. Like Caleb Smith wasn't a need. He was a insurance policy. Well, fortunately, the younger kid stepped up this spring and had good springs, and he basically kind of got beat out. And so I think that's where Notre Dame needs to be, Ryan. I think there's a lot of fans that want Notre Dame just to embrace the portal, and every time there's this new name in the portal, hey, Notre Dame should go after this guy. No, they're good there. They don't need another running back. Develop the kids that you have.
They are embracing the portal. It's just that their thought process and perspective is different.
They saw what happened to USC last year, and that's your rival, and I think that's where people want to go. They want the next Caleb Williams. Well, you know who got the next Caleb Williams this year? Nobody. Yeah. And if you were going to say somebody did, it'd be Notre Dame because they got the best portal quarterback. You're not going to have and here's the deal, folks. Caleb Williams is not in the portal unless his coach left. Did anyone actually think Caleb Williams was going to go anywhere other than USC? I mean, he took other visits or what? I mean, guys, we always knew where he was going to go, and I have no problem with it. Why else be in Norman, Oklahoma, unless you're going to play football there? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, what else are you doing there? So, to me, that's kind of where I see it, Ryan, is it's a healthy place for Notre Dame to be if they can continue to embrace the portal the way that they did this year, and then also as an institution – give them the flexibility to add a undergrad or two every year. I don't think Notre Dame is going to be in the habit of bringing in 7 or 8 guys with 3-4 years of eligibility left. I think it's going to mostly be the Sam Hartmans, the Baptistes, the Carters, and the Harpers, 1 to 2. But it'd be nice if you could have a guy or two a year if it's the right guy. I mean, you know who I pray is going to jump in the portal in December, right? I mean, you know who it is. Freshman at another school that I'm really hoping decides he should have gone to Notre Dame.
Sure. Mr. Keeley. Yeah.
A guy can dream, right? Can a guy dream? But some things like that, you always want to have room for guys like that. But those need to be somewhat rare. Like 1-2 guys a year is really where it's going to be. Because if they can repeat this class every year, Ryan, from an impact standpoint, I'm fine. I'm good with that. I really am. I don't know if you feel the same way, but I really like this portal class for Notre Dame. I really do. Too.
Yeah, I think it fills gaps and it fills the biggest needs on the roster. Which again, if Marcus Freeman is going to get Notre Dame to a consistent winner, and I'm talking about that sustainability, I don't think that Notre Dame is going to be a team that is going to just have max exoduses every single year because they're just running on 1-year contracts, basically, right? Where you're just like, nope, time to reload. Like, no, Notre Dame is going to build through the freshman class consistently. And that's how I want it to be, because Notre Dame is one of those situations also where culture matters so much to Notre Dame, right? It's the legacy. It's who's come before you. It's the 4 for 40. Like, all that stuff matters so much to Notre Dame. And, no disrespect to some other schools, but like some other schools don't have that type of long history and that long reach in the alumni base. And they just don't have that to the degree that Notre Dame has. So yes, I don't want to bring in a bunch of 1-year rentals of guys that don't have that same belief in the message, right? Like I want Notre Dame to be built off of what's made it Notre Dame. Like why is everyone in this chat Notre Dame fans? Yes, it's the winning, it's national championships growing up most likely, but it's also the fact of like Notre Dame's difference than a lot of other places. Like that's a big thing. It's their difference.
You're seeing that a lot less in younger fans. Like there's a guy in our chat who just talking about, I want Urban Meyer to be the next guy. I would sell my soul to Urban Meyer. I'm like, that's not the normal to me Notre Dame fan stance.
Yeah.
With people my age, but the younger you get, the more people, I don't think people understand that you can win the way that Notre Dame wants to win. You just have to have the right people in place, right? Sure. You do need a special coach. You do need an Eric Parsegian. You do need a Lou Holtz. You do need that kind of guy to win. But you can do it that way. And the reality is you can bang your head against the wall and pray that Notre Dame is going to do this. Hey, let them bring in anybody with a pulse for academics. As long as they qualify NCAA, bring them in. Who cares if guys are out getting in trouble? Who cares if guys are doing this? As long as they win. No, that's not how Notre Dame is going to be. And I'm not selling my soul so that Notre Dame can win football games. Yeah. And neither is Notre Dame, at least not in that regard. They might in other areas, Ryan. You know what I mean? That involve money, but they're not going to do it when it comes to things like that. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
And I think that Marcus Freeman has found the sweet spot with the transfer portal this offseason. I really do. I just hope they don't have to keep going back to it and this is the danger zone, right? By bringing in Sam Hartman, which was 100% the right decision, 100%. You did have two quarterbacks transfer out. And now you're like, okay, do you need to go back there again next year?
Right.
And then it's like, okay, but then if you do that, and then let's say another guy or two transfers out, well, now you kind of get into that thing where at least at some point, hopefully you can get to where Ohio State is, where you're bringing in a transfer quarterback, but it's a guy that's, hey, bro, you're coming here to back up the younger guys and be an insurance policy.
Right.
You know what I mean? Which is much less likely to cause a transfer than bringing in a Sam Hartman type of guy.
Yep.
And even though, again, it was 100% needed to get Sam Hartman. I have no issue with it. You just have to understand sometimes there's going to be those type of, I don't even want to say consequences because that makes it seem like it's a negative, but that's going to be the reaction at certain positions when you do that is somebody's going to leave. And you have to be able to embrace that and be prepared to recruit that on the trail. And I think you're also seeing this staff is getting a little bit more aggressive with numbers and recruiting. Now they're not going to get crazy and bring in 30 guys this year, but if they can get up to 25, I think you're going to see them more willing to do that now than it was maybe a month ago.
Sure.
In my opinion.
Yeah.
So Ryan, that's going to do it for this portion of the show. We're going to do a mailbag next, which is going to be a lot of fun. We do have some questions, not a lot of questions so far, a lot of good conversation going on today, but not a lot of questions. So if you have some questions, I think we have about 10, so far. So, if you have some more, get those in. Just put MB on there. Leave us your question. But before we get there, Ryan, folks, I want you to ask us to do us a favor. Hit that like button. Hit the subscribe button. Hit the notification bell. Share this podcast. If you've not done so already, go to your favorite podcast platform. And if you're listening via podcast or if you even listen on YouTube, go to your favorite podcast platform and subscribe to CFB Nation. For those of you that are Lucky Lefty fans, for those of you that like the CFB All-America shows, for those of you who are kind of hopefully looking forward to some of the shows that we're going to launch here this summer on CFB Nation, pretty soon the only way you're going to be able to find those is on the CFB Nation app. So if you're getting those shows now on the Irish Breakdown app, that's going to go away soon. So, and I know that Sean talks about this on his show. So your only way you're going to be able to find it is on the CFB Nation app. We have some other things that we're going to do. It's going to be a lot of fun. Looking forward to that. So you're definitely going to want to check that out. So subscribe to CFB Nation on the podcast platform. So Mr. Roberts, it's mailbag time.
Yes,
and we're going to start off. We have a super chat down here from very interesting name from Trash. Thank you, Trash, for your super chat.
Yes, Trash. Thank you very much. Before the ACC days, I have a memory of football year that every game we played was against a rival. Why is that? And who are Notre Dame's true rivals?
Well, that was back. I mean, that was kind of how it was when I was young. And it seemed like the first month of the season, you were playing Michigan State, Purdue, some form of that early in the season. Then you'd have USC. it wasn't quite to that that level. I mean, if you look at the 1988 season, and obviously you had Michigan, Michigan State, you had USC. Those are three traditional rivals. Miami had become a rival at that time. They played Stanford that year, Ryan, but Notre Dame and Stanford weren't really a rival yet. They weren't playing each other every year until the 90s at some point in time is when that became sort of a playing each other every year type of thing. I'm going to actually go back and look at that. So they've played 35 times in history. Think about that. And they've been playing every year for a while. So they hadn't played a whole lot of times before that 1988 game. As a matter of fact, when they played in 1988, they hadn't played Stanford since 1964 prior to that year. So it wasn't a rivalry yet. And you look at the rest of the schedule, you had Michigan, Michigan State, Purdue. Started the season off with rivals. Pitt wasn't really a rival. Miami was a sort of a new rival. Navy, you had Air Force, Rice, Penn State, kind of a rival, USC. So why was that? Because they were playing a lot more northern teams back then. Right. A lot more teams that they had along, because football used to be kind of more geographical than it is now when it came to your regular season. You'd have Ohio State going out and playing USC or UCLA in the regular season at times, and Washington and Notre Dame would always go all over, but you weren't doing that a ton. And the teams that were doing it were the Notre Dames and the Penn States that were doing that because they had to, because they were independents. So they would play some of those games. Notre Dame did that a lot more than did Penn State. And then you'd see teams like Michigan would play Miami, Florida State. They would always schedule tough. But why? Because the Big Ten only had 10 teams, and you were encouraged to go out and play teams out of your conference. Big Ten was the big conference back then because the Big Eight only had 8 teams. The Southwest Conference, they had like 8 teams. The ACC had like 8 teams. The Pac-10 was not the Pac-10 back then. It was the Pac-8, I believe, if it was still the Pac-8 back then. And so, yeah, actually, let me go look that up. So the ACC had 8 teams. The Big 8 had 8 teams. Imagine that. They actually had the number of teams you're supposed to have. The Pac-10 was the Pac-10 then, Ryan. So they did have 10 then, but it wasn't for very long. The Southwest Conference had 8 teams. And the SEC had 10 teams. So you had 2 teams that were 10. That's it. Everybody else was less than that. And then, of course, you had the long list of independents that we've listed. So when you have 8 teams, you only have 7 conference games. You have now 4 non-conferences because back then, a lot of times you only played 11 games in the regular season.
Yeah.
And so you had a lot more games to fill. And so, that's what you kind of had to do. So, I mean, I think it was just because it was more geographically based. The ACC for Notre Dame doesn't make a lot of sense geographically from a on-field standpoint. It makes a lot of sense for them recruiting-wise and things along those lines, but it didn't make a lot of sense. Back then, you were just going to play a lot of Midwestern teams. That's just kind of how it was. And so that's why. And I kind of missed that. I would like to see Michigan State back on the schedule more regularly. I'd like to see Purdue on the schedule a little bit more regularly. I do not care about Michigan, but I don't. I just don't care. I'm in the minority. I do hate them, which is why I don't want to give them the ability, give them the platform to possibly even get anything out of playing Notre Dame.
Oh, I just want to be.
I'm in the minority there.
Yeah,
but to me, Michigan State and Purdue are much more true rivals because they weren't trying to block Notre Dame from joining the Big Ten and didn't refuse to play Notre Dame. Michigan fans like say, "Oh, well, we taught you how to play football." Yeah, and exactly what happened after we got real good at it? You stopped playing us and then tried to block us from joining the Big Ten for 50 years. You know what I mean? So, sorry, I'm not going to get too excited about you trying to help Notre Dame learn how to play football, but that's really what it boils down to. And I just think that it's harder nowadays to kind of establish those Miami type of rivalries from a team that's not in your league. And, you're just not going to see a team like what's the advantage for Michigan in all fairness? What's the advantage for Michigan to play Notre Dame every year?
As far as, it's
what benefit does Michigan have other than it being a rivalry? What benefit is there for Michigan to play Notre Dame every year right now? Because they just proved they can play nobody in the non-conference and still get the playoff as long as they beat Ohio State. So why expose themselves to potentially losing to a team like Notre Dame in the non-conference? There's no benefit to it the way that it's constructed now. You can go like this, but the reality is you're not gonna get punished. And
it's still proven that you are the power in the Midwest potentially. I mean, you're still trying to flex
Michigan
your
goes to the
muscles in that
playoff.
regard.
Does anyone question whether or not Michigan was the best team in the Midwest last year because they didn't play Notre Dame? The point is, if they beat Ohio State, they're going to get in the playoff. So why would you expose yourself to playing Notre Dame in the non-conference? Now, Ryan, I'm not arguing that it's the right thing to do. I think you should challenge yourself in the non-conference. That's the right thing to do. My point is, if you're looking at what the teams are looking to do now, which is just make the playoff, there's no benefit to scheduling tough in your non-conference because you're not being punished if you don't. That's my point.
Sure.
And to me, the NCAA needs to go back to, hey, look, Michigan, we're more impressed with this 11-1 team that actually played people than we are with you, who went 12-0 and played two good teams all year. And then start rewarding those teams that play tough. That if you do that, then that changes things. So part of the reason you're not going to see those rivalries with the big names is because there's just no incentive for those teams to do that. Now, kudos to Ohio State for still going out there and playing the Oklahomas and the Notre Dames and teams like that, right? Kudos to the teams that are still willing to have those tests non-conference. But I mean, for a lot of you're going to see less, especially when they go to 12-team playoff, Ryan. There's even less reason to play non-conference unless the committee starts changing how they view teams. Start putting teams in, start giving teams lower rankings or not putting them in at all if they don't play anybody at a conference. Like that to me would be the only way to fix it.
I get it. I mean, I understand your point. I understand that the teams don't get as much out of it, but I mean, what builds and why people are fans of college football, in my opinion, are for the rivalries. Like,
I don't disagree with you at all.
Yeah,
you and I are on the same page in that regard. Yeah. Those games should happen, whether it's Michigan State and Notre Dame or Michigan and Notre Dame, whatever. The rivalry should be there. My point is simply that you're going to see less of that now because of the way that the postseason is determined, and that's my complaint. And that's my issue with it. And it's also what were the goals back in the day was when you were a Big Ten team, your goal was to win the Rose Bowl. That was your goal. Now it's like you have team like Ohio State literally had the audacity this year to say, if we don't make the playoff, we don't want to play in the Rose Bowl. I was so disgusted by that. I've been there, done that. Like, are you serious? Like, you're just spitting on the tradition of your school that now somehow the Rose Bowl now is beneath you. And I'm like, but this is what the current system has done. It's cheapened things like that. And I don't like it, but that also explains why you're just not going to have some of the rivalries out of conference that you used to have. It's one of the many reasons why that's the case. I don't like it, but it's just the way that it is.
Yeah. Next question is from Rob Osgood. Thank you for the question, Rob. Said, I like the way Notre Dame is going about the transfer portal, kind of like free agency. You fill your needs as they come up. I know it's looking in the future, but what is your expectation on the transfer portal for next year? Thank you. I think it'll
look a little similar to this year, Ryan. To me, I think that quarterback may be where you got to go. You may have to go there again next year. I could see a scenario where Notre Dame might be in the conversation for a offensive tackle, perhaps, depending on how young guys develop. If Joe Walt goes pro, especially if both him and Blake Fisher go pro. And again, right now my prediction would be one of those guys comes back. Probably Blake Fisher would be my prediction for now, barring injury. But, to me, I could see that. I could see a scenario where they feel the need to go back to the portal for another big end, depending on because Nana is going to be a fifth-year senior this year. I guess he could come back for a sixth year, and Javante's gone after this year. So depending on how your young guys develop, I could see a scenario there. And safety might have to be a need again next year, depending on how some young guys develop and how your recruiting class goes. So I think it'll be similar, Ryan, 4 to 5 guys, just different positions in some of those instances. But there's going to be an injury somewhere that's going to shake that up a little bit too. It happens every year, happens to everybody. There's going to be somebody that has a breakout year that maybe goes pro that we're not anticipating. Like, hey, I'm anticipating, Riley Mills being back in the next year, but what if he has a great year, or goes pro, or sometimes you need a great year, just make a bad decision sometimes. But, there's all types of things that can happen. Yep. Running back may be a position they have to go to next year, depending on how recruiting goes. Can they get 2 signees in this class? But if Audric Estime goes pro and you have another injury there, all of a sudden kind of have some needs there. So tight end's another one, Ryan, where if, let's say Mitchell Evans has a great year and he goes pro and you still have the same injury issues that you've had with certain guys, now all of a sudden tight end might become a need there. So some of it's going to be shaken up, but I think it's going to be very similar numbers wise to where it is this year. About 5 or 6 guys is kind of where I expect them to be.
And I
next
think
year.
that shows program health, back to our original point.
Agree.
So I'm happy with that. I would be very happy with it. If it was anything more, that becomes if there's a big need to pull in like 10 to 15 guys, you're like, there's probably a lot of exits in the program, and that's probably not a good sign.
One of two things would be true in that instance, Ryan. One is, and this is where you were going, some stuff hit the fan and a bunch of dudes bounced. The other alternative is they go out there and dominate and win a title this year, and a bunch of dudes go pro that they weren't anticipating going pro, and you've got to get up to like 10 to 12 portal guys. I guess that'd be a nice problem to have. But most likely would be the first example, which is some stuff didn't go well and guys are leaving.
Question from David Lowe says, is Antonio Carter going to be a true one safety or a depth piece?
Well, I mean, Ryan, I think he's being brought in to compete for that. Sure. I mean, he could end up being both. I mean, it is kind of both, don't you think? I mean, yes, he's going to compete for a starting job, but it also helps improve the depth. I mean, I'll say this. He's not being brought in to just in case something doesn't happen, something happens to somebody else, you're there to help him. He's being brought in to compete, and he's going to be given opportunities just like DJ Brown and Ramon Henderson and Xavier Watts are going to be given opportunities to earn a starting job. He's going to be given that opportunity. There's no question about it. Will he win it? I don't know about that, but he's going to be given that opportunity. No question.
Well, he had opportunities to go to Wisconsin, Iowa, LSU, Florida. Like all those programs, David, are not recruiting him to just be a guy on the sideline all the time, right? Like those guys. I mean, he was very high on like Wisconsin for a little bit there. Because he would have went in and probably started day one from Wisconsin. So I don't think that he would be going to Notre Dame if he was just, I'm going to have no chance to compete, but I'm going to get a degree and I'm just going to be a key backup. Like I'm pretty sure Antonio has a little bit of that behind him that say like, hey, I'm going to go in and I'm going to compete. And because Notre Dame has laid that out of like, you're going to get an opportunity to do that. So I think that he has an opportunity to compete, but regardless, you got another number in the room, which was very important. Next question is from Archer452. What's up, Archer? It says, reports today that 7 ACC teams have been meeting to discuss how to either make more money or get out of their conference. Where do you think all the schools end up, and does the Big East reform?
No, I mean, there's no way a new conference is going to start, I don't think, unless it starts as like a AAC kind of turns back into the Big East and it's not a major conference anymore.
They're just going to go to a couple of the major conferences.
Yeah,
right?
it's just
like
the Big Ten and the Big 10, the Big 12. Like one report I saw today, somebody sent me that Louisville is now the 8th team that's now considering this. But the conference that's pursuing Louisville is the Big 12. So you're on your way to sort of that Big 3 now with basically the Big 12 and the Big 10 picking the carcass off of the Pac-12. And then if the ACC implodes, which right now there's a lot that has to happen for this to be the case, you're going to see the ACC get split up into the Big 10 and the SEC. But some of those teams are going to end up going to the Big 12, in my opinion. Like, to me, I don't know if Pitt's a team that the ACC or the Big 10 or the Big East or the SEC are going to want, but I bet you the Big 12 would make a lot of sense for the Big 12. You already have West Virginia. You now solidify that Western PA, Eastern Ohio market, and you've brought in a football rivalry. Not that rivalries matter a ton, but it doesn't hurt, right? I mean, so you need to add something geographically to what you're doing with West Virginia. You have West Virginia in the Big 12. You bring Louisville in, maybe that then makes sense for them to go after Syracuse and, team Boston College, perhaps. And then kind of you have your Big 12 East, So I think you can have something like that. But I think if something doesn't change, Ryan, what I think is going to happen is we're not going to have 2 mega conferences. We're going to have 3. And I think the Big 12 is maneuvering in a way to where if they can make a couple savvy moves, they could survive this.
Yeah.
Where the ACC is going to have a hard time surviving this. in one of two ways. One is the teams are going to find some way to get out. Even if it means one of the TV companies is willing to help them pay the buyout fee, which is like $100 million per team, which is
crazy.
nuts. And the big problem that these schools are having is because they don't, Florida State can't compete financially, because it's a state school. There's not a lot of money going into the state schools in Florida, and they need that football revenue and sports revenue more than, Miami does, which is a pretty well-to-do private school. So I think that it's either going to become a conference that nobody cares about, that's way behind everybody else, and they're an afterthought if those teams can't get out, because they're now 60, 70, $80 million behind a year with those other teams, or it's going to implode, and you're going to see the Big 12 be really smart about going hard after some of those teams that maybe the SEC and Big 10 aren't pursuing as hard right away. Right? Because the Big 10 and the SEC are going to go after Florida State, Clemson, Miami, and the Carolina teams, right? Like that those are just the markets that they want to get into, right? They want to get into that growing Charlotte market. They want to get in Clemson. They want to get Miami, because that's a market that the people want. And then all of a sudden, Florida State's a name brand that brings something to the market. But maybe they don't go after Louisville as hard. So they're going to be, Big Ten's going to be going after Florida State as well. But so then maybe the Big 12 is savvy and say, hey, while they're fighting for Florida State, Clemson, and Miami, we're going to come in and we're going to steal Louisville. We're going to steal Pitt. We're going to steal, We're going to steal Boston College and get that sort of that northeastern market that Ohio State tried to, or the Big 10 tried to get with Rutgers. We're going to now take it, because we're going to get Boston College and Syracuse, right? And so I could see something like that where the Big 12 ends up being smart about going after the right teams, go after the Arizonas. That's another state that's booming, right? I mean, it's growing. The markets are getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Go after the Salt Lake City market, go after the Denver market, and get Utah, get Colorado, get Arizona State, then go out east, get Louisville, Pitt, Boston College, and Syracuse. And now you've just made yourself sort of a national brand, and you've gotten some pretty decent markets. Now, you didn't get like the mega markets, but you just got yourself into some pretty decent size: Salt Lake City, Denver, Phoenix, Tucson, Boston, Pittsburgh, New York. You've now gotten some markets that you could say, hey, we can do something here, and you become a lot more attractive. So I think the Big 12 could be a team that becomes a sneaky mover here when it comes to this conference realignment, and it'll end up not making the Big Two. We have the Big Three, and I think the Big Three is better for football than the Big Two, or better for college sports than the Big Two, because at least there's some counterweight to the Big 10 and the SEC. That's my hope anyway. That might be a little bit more wishful thinking, but we're seeing the Big 12 making some of these moves. I mean, going after Louisville and teams, things like that. I could see that, because there's just some of those teams in those, like, here's a question, right? Where does Stanford go? Who the heck wants Stanford and Cal right now? They're not very big markets. They're not schools that really take their football program seriously. Don't be shocked if in 10 years from now, if things don't change with how it's all made up, if Stanford's not an FCS team or a Mountain West team that just doesn't care. Like, because eventually, if these things happen, you're going to see they're going to see two footballs, two conferences, or two leagues. You're going to have the Power 5 league is going to kind of break off and be its own thing, and all the Mountain West and the MACs are going to kind of still be in the NCAA. Don't be shocked if there's some teams like Stanford left behind in that conversation.
It's interesting.
Don't be shocked, because what's the value that Stanford adds right now for what they care about? They don't care about Olympic sports, and the Stanford has as good Olympic sports as anybody, and they're phenomenal. But nobody cares about that as far as the TV deals and stuff like that. And Stanford doesn't care about football. They've made that very clear.
Yeah. So
what's the value? People really want that Northern California college football market? I don't think so.
The stupid tree as a mascot.
Exactly.
It's their pool.
Exactly. So that'll be interesting. Very, very interesting.
I did miss the Big East, though, man. That was better than action, in my opinion, when West Virginia and Rutgers and all those were good. That was fun.
Yeah.
Fun times, but they're gone.
Agreed. I don't like any of this, Ryan. I think it's to the point where it's getting close to being inevitable that the current Power 5 is dying. The Pac-12, when I heard that the Pac-12 was talking to the CW about games. I was like, they're done. They're done. They got no chance. The CW, really? For real? Trying to tap into that teenage market of college football fans? Like, what are we doing here?
It's really smart, man.
You
It's
know?
really smart. They're ahead of the curve.
You know, it's just like, come on, man. And then once they lost LA, it's like, okay, they're done. You know, it's just a matter of time. And then Oregon and Washington won out. They're going to end up going to the Big Ten from everything I'm reading. It's inevitable now, unfortunately, Ryan. And I don't like it. Just the way it's going to be, sadly.
Well, I knew the Pac-12 was going to die as soon as I saw how they handled COVID a few years ago. So I knew that was going to die after that, to be honest. They
brought it on themselves in a lot of ways. Like some of the things they did, like with the the TV thing, like you literally lived in California and you couldn't get Pac-12 games on TV because of the way that they did. I mean, it's like I say this all the time, right? It amazes me how many people who are just not good at what they do get hired to very important jobs.
Yes.
It just and it's as prevalent in college sports as anywhere. It's just like, how does this person have that job that they have? It just blows my mind. And then they let the fact that they let Larry Scott be in charge of the Pac-12 as long as they did was like, it's like they were trying to commit athletic suicide.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just like, I've joked about this before, Ryan. Like, I used to make this joke as a Broncos fan. Because remember how Bill Belichick couldn't beat Mike Shanahan? Like, just couldn't beat Mike Shanahan and struggled against the Broncos, even when Shanahan left. And then they hired Josh McDaniels. He just like runs the Broncos in the ground. It's a joke. Like, if I were to tell you Bill Belichick planted Josh McDaniels in Denver to ruin the Broncos franchise, what would he have done different than what he actually did, right? Now, I don't think that's what happened, but you get the joke that I'm making, right? And I've kind of said that about like the Pac-12. Like, if the Pac-12, if Larry Scott was a plant to destroy the Pac-12 by the SEC and the Big Ten, what would he have done different than he actually did if that were the case?
That's a good point.
Right?
Point.
Now, again, I don't think that that's true. I'm just making a point of how bad he was at his job.
Well, sometimes I think about, like, they let me vote for the Davey O'Brien Award. I'm like, there must be idiots, man. Like, why are they letting me vote for it? Just kidding.
I wasn't going to say nothing,
Right? How do I know?
Who voted for Carson Strong? Hold on a second.
I liked Carson Strong, man.
I know you did. That's why I'm saying that's what made that joke funny, because I knew who that voter would have been.
Who would have known that Carson Strong was going to be a turd of a person?
We got a two-parter here from our LSU fan.
Insured by Big says, one of two, obviously. Notre Dame has a great chance to make the college football playoff or win it all this year. But how long is the leash on Marcus Freeman before his seat gets warm if that doesn't happen? I come from an irrational fan base, so I was just curious of the Notre Dame fan base. Thanks, guys.
Yeah, Notre Dame is not an insane fan base. I mean, this is a very fair question coming from an SEC fan. Very fair question, right? I mean, SEC and NBA are those leagues where, like, if you don't win in a couple years, you're out. Here's the reality
University
of
of
it.
Florida.
Right. Notre Dame is not going to be pulling a Dan Mullen situation for two reasons. Number one, Marcus Freeman is far more likable than Dan Mullen. Far more likable. And I've said this all the time. If you're going to be a jerk, you better win. Because the moment you stop winning, all you have is your jerk. Right? So I really do hate using this word leash, but it's long, as long as he's running the program the right way, not getting into trouble, not the kids are, the academics take a tank. I mean, none of that's happening. The only thing that could make the leash short is if they just implode. And because if they go like 6-6 this year, Ryan, yeah, it's clear that he's not the man for the job right now. That it's too much too soon, right? I mean, that's how I would take it. Now, I have zero concern that that's going to happen. Zero. Like, because we've already seen him do better than that with a worse roster than the one he's going to have in 2023. The point being is it would require something disastrous like that for him to be on any kind of warm seat, much less a hot seat. It would really
locker room issues on top of it, guys leaving the legal program because it's just like, what is happening? Like,
it would require an absolute implosion for that to be the case, because Notre Dame is a more patient place, and I'm actually okay with that. I mean, look, why did Ty Willingham get fired after 3 years? it's because he wasn't doing anything. He wasn't working. It was so obvious that he was just not fit for the job, nor did it even seem like he even wanted the job, to be completely honest with you. And that's why he got ran out sooner than any other coach has really ever been run out. And so, but he even got 3 years.
Yeah.
And so, and Marcus Freeman works a lot harder than Ty Willingham did, which is why he won't be fired in 3 years. But it would take it. I mean, and he oversaw the worst recruiting class I've ever seen at Notre. I mean, for a Power 5 team ever. I mean, it was like, go look at his last recruiting. No, his last recruiting class.
Was it 2004?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. It was so bad. I mean, it was. I'm actually going to bring it up now. I'm just going to use Rivals, because Rivals is really the only service that's survived since then. You can talk about people complaining now. Notre Dame signed 16 players in that class, Ryan.
Yeah.
Signed 2 4-stars. Anthony Vernaglia and Junior Jabby.
Ooh, Junior Jabby. Nice.
Yeah. They signed 4, 5, 6 2-star players that were not specialists.
Oof.
Abdel Banda was a linebacker that was a 2-star. Treg Dewerson was a 2-star DB. David Wolke was a 2-star quarterback. Justin Brown was a 2-star D-end. Darren Bragg was a 2-star quarterback, and Leo Farine was a 2-star DB. Now, Justin Brown actually did okay. He actually played. The rest of that class, Terrell Lambert was good. Darius Walker and Mo Crum were 3 stars. They were better than that. Ronald Talley, John Cato, Brandon Nicholas, Chancey Incarnato, Justin Hoskins. So outside of Terrell Lambert, Darius Walker, and Mo Crum, you didn't get a whole lot out of that class, to be honest with you.
It's a really big class.
And it was a terrible class. Terrible class.
Where did that rank nationally? That had to be like...
Oh, it was bad. It was 32nd.
Oh, really? Oh, that high, really? I thought it would be way lower than that.
Yeah. It was pretty bad. I don't know how it ranked that high. An average 2.7 star rating. Now, keep in mind, Ryan, that they gave out a lot more 2-stars back then.
Oof.
So it was a little bit different than it is now. For example, Oklahoma that year finished with the number 8 8 class in the country, and they finished second in star rating, and they signed a 2-star that year. Wow. Defensive tackle 2-star that year. So they gave a lot more of those out. LSU that year finished with the number 2 recruiting class. They had a 2-star running back in that class. Now, here's the funny thing is, do you know who this 2-star was that they signed? You don't know. It's a rhetorical question. I'm sorry.
Oh, but wait, can I guess? Am I
guessing?
Yeah, of
course.
Now? Oh, 2004 or is this 2003?
Yeah, 2004 class. They signed a running back.
Joseph Adai.
Nope. It was Jacob Hester.
Oh, Jacob Hester.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep.
Nice.
Yep. I should have said fullback.
He was a good player. Oh, I would have gotten it if you would have said fullback.
But that class had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 2- and 3-star players. That number 2 ranked LSU class. So they were a lot more liberal with the ranking back then. So it wasn't abnormal to have a 2-star in a class, but to have 6, that's pretty bad. That's pretty bad. But could you imagine how Notre Dame fans would be acting right now if they signed anything even close to that? Even if all those 2-stars were 3-stars, I mean, it was, oh my gosh.
I shouldn't laugh at it too much, but what DJ Armageddon just said in the chat was pretty funny. Maybe chuckle a little bit.
I'll have to find that one here in a second.
it's like
okay. Actually, they weren't. That's actually not accurate. So I mean, if you go back and look at that class, it's actually not even close to being accurate to what that class did. So I'm gonna look at it now. That 2004 class, none of the running backs were that. None of the DBs were that, and they didn't sign any receivers. So
good.
Yeah. So not accurate.
You can't sign any white receivers if you don't sign a receiver.
Yes. They didn't sign any receivers of any persuasion whatsoever. But yes, that's a factually inaccurate. And Robbie Parrish was not part of that class. So it was a dark time, Ryan. Very, very dark time. And the funny thing is, the class before that was really good. It's like really good. The 2003 class that he signed, because that was the class that was built on the 02 season where they won 10 games.
Yeah.
But that class, I mean, you had Brady Quinn in that class. You had Jeff Samardzija in that class. Chinedum Ndukwe was in that class. John Carlson, Travis Thomas was a pretty good player. John Sullivan was a highly ranked guy. Ryan Harris was in that class. So Trevor Laws, Victor Abiamiri was in that class. Freddie Parrish was a 4-star kid. Ambrose Wooden was a highly ranked kid in that class. Tom Zbikowski was a 4-star recruit. So the class before that was pretty flipping good. Let's see. They had 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 guys from that class got drafted. And it would have been in the NFL. It would have been 9 if Samardzija would have gone pro.
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was and then the next year he goes out and signs the worst class I've ever seen in my entire life by a mile at Notre Dame. It was so bad. So bad.
I should do an article on the worst recruiting classes in Notre Dame history.
Yeah. I mean, it's like no one, it'd need to be a 2-parter, Ryan, where you kind of do that one by itself because no other class deserves to be put on that same stage as that horrible, horrible class. You signed 2 quarterbacks and they were both 2-stars. Now, I think, if I remember correctly, I think Darren Bragg transferred to UCLA and moved to receiver.
Yeah, I think that sounds correct to me.
Yeah. So. I could be wrong on that, but I thought that's what happened. So, yeah, it was not. I was trying to look up Darren Bragg's stats, but it keeps taking me to the dude that played in Major League Baseball. I can't find the other Darren Bragg's numbers, but anyway, we'll move right along there, Mr. Roberts.
Okay,
let me get up here.
Next question is from Double R, which is great initials, by the way. I just posted in the room and missed this startup. I am sorry, Notre Dame. Double R, Carson's Corner is the deal. Love you guys.
Thank you very, very much. Appreciate that. Yes.
Archer says, how long do you think it will take Antonio to get used to the jump of competition? What kind of expectations are realistic for guys transferring up levels?
I mean, it depends on the player. I mean, Ryan, we saw this last year. I mean, you first of all, one thing you have to consider is one of the questions: what league is he coming from? Right. Yes. I think that's obviously a big question. The CAA, you and I were talking about this with Antonio before the show started.
Yep.
We were talking about all the guys from his league that have transferred and been successful. And then, of course, last year, just 2 that were very good. You had Jared Verse transferred in from that league. And the other one was Antoine Wells, who went to South Carolina from James Madison. Now, when he left James Madison, they were still in the CAA. They were still an FCS team as the year before they jumped up to D1.
Yeah.
But Antoine Wells had 68 catches for 928 yards this year in the SEC.
Yeah.
So we've seen a lot of those kids do it. It just depends on the caliber of the player, honestly. And because you got to think about it, you've got all summer of the workouts to get used to the speed. You've got all fall camp. And then the season kicks off with Navy and Tennessee. I mean, he's literally going to play a bad FCS team in the second game. His first home note. I mean, literally, the team Notre Dame is going to play in his first home game at Notre Dame is worse than almost every team he played at Rhode Island last year.
It's
almost.
True. It's true.
And so he'll have plenty of games. I mean, he'll have 2 games also, plus all that other stuff I talked about before NC State comes to town. Then it's Central Michigan. And let's be honest, there are some teams, because here's the thing, there are some FCS teams that can beat Division I teams, some of the worst Division I teams. We've seen it. We see it happen all the time now. And the CAA is a team that's been doing that for years. I mean, the CAA has handed the ACC a lot of losses over the years. James Madison, William & Mary, Richmond. I was just
going to say, James Madison also just moved up into the group of 5, and they were pretty dang good in year 1, right? So, I mean,
right.
It happens.
They were a CAA team the year before. Did they even win the CAA the year before, Ryan? I can't remember. I think they did, right? Didn't they go to the national championship game?
They ran the CAA for a couple of years, James Madison. So, now it's William & Mary.
Was 2021 the year that they were runners up? I'm trying
Sounds right. I mean, they were runners up a lot.
No, they didn't win the CAA the previous year, Ryan. That's because they weren't eligible for it. That I knew there was some reason why they tied with Villanova for first.
Oh, Villanova. Nice.
Yeah. Villanova's another team that's beaten some Division I's in recent years and given some teams some games. So yeah, I mean James Madison lost to Villanova, so technically Villanova was the champs. Villanova did not lose until the semifinals. So yeah, they did not. Yeah, that can't be right. Hold on, this doesn't make any sense. Oh, James Madison lost to Villanova. Who'd Villanova lose to that year? James Madison had only one regular season loss to Villanova. Then they lost to North Dakota in semifinals. So Villanova in 2021 only had one loss as a women married. Their other regular season loss was to Penn State.
Yeah.
And then they went to the postseason and lost to South Dakota State in the second round, who you've said is a really good FCS team now.
Very good. And they brought back this year.
So James Madison ties for the league lead in their division, and then they come out. They then move up to Division I and go. What, they won 8 games this year?
Something like
right?
that.
8-3.
They were
won
8-3
this year. Yeah, blew out Middle Tennessee, blew out Norfolk State, beat App State on the road, blew out Texas State 40-13, blew out Arkansas State on the road 42-20, blew out Old Dominion 37-3, beat Georgia State by 2, beat Coastal Carolina by 40, 47-7, and then lost by a touchdown to Georgia Southern, got blown out by Louisville, and then lost by 2 touchdowns to Marshall. So that was their season in year one coming up from the CAA. So now, if you were to talk to me, Ryan, about a kid coming up from a different league, to me, I think kid coming up from the MEAC, it's going to be a little bit tougher.
Sure.
A kid coming up from the Northeast Conference might be a little bit tougher, but we've seen a kid. Who was the kid from Duquesne? Verse was from Duquesne, right? Actually,
Albany.
Okay. Who was the kid from Duquesne that came up a couple years ago? Wasn't there a D lineman that came up from Duquesne a couple years ago?
Don't remember Duquesne, but I mean, Albany's in the Northeast Conference anyway. Right. So to your point,
yeah. Those teams are some of those teams. No, they're in the CAA now. They're not in the Northeast anymore. They're in the CAA now. Yeah. They are the worst team in the CAA. I only know that because my former boss is their head coach now.
Gotcha.
There's a Pioneer League. Be a lot tougher of a transition. That's just not as good of a league. That's the Davidson, Thomas More, San Diego, Morehead State. That's the league I coached against. Now, a lot of those teams, it's that like Marist was in our division when I was at Duquesne, because Duquesne was in a different league when I was there. I'm trying to remember the name of the league that we were in. It was made up a lot differently.
The Pioneer League is the only FCS or FBS pro league that does not give athletic scholarships.
Right.
So, yeah.
There used to be 2, and the league that Duquesne was in was the other. It was called the 1AA Mid-Major.
Mm-hmm.
And so, that's a tougher transition, right, Ryan? I mean,
sure.
To me, the Ohio Valley is a good conference, but it's not as good as the others. That would be a little bit of a tougher transition to me to make. So there's some levels where it's like, it just depends on where they're coming from, to be honest with you. I'd have said Ivy League until I watched what Chris Smith did for Notre Dame and John Sott did for Notre Dame last year. I would have said before, Ivy's a tough one.
Harvard's got a couple dudes, man.
Yeah.
Harvard's got a couple dudes.
Yeah, there's a guy I know for a fact you and I would have liked to have seen jump in the portal and have Notre Dame go after. So it just depends on the league and it depends on the kid. It really does. I mean, every kid's going to have a tougher transition.
I mean, Antonio Carter just had a teammate that transferred to Oregon, to Johnny Cornelius, who's going to start at right tackle for Oregon next year as well. If you got the chops, you got the chops, man.
Yep, absolutely. It's a good way of putting it.
From NH says, B. Ryan, this was great. It's so enjoyable to get a chance to meet these young men. Thank you. Well, thank you for listening. We appreciate it.
Yeah. That's why we wanted to get him on, Ryan, because he's just, you and I both had a chance to talk to him. He's just a really
nice kid.
Really good kid, really unique kid. But also, I mean, you all met, he's laid back, he's talking soft, he's very intelligent, but then you put the pads on and he's knocking heads, man. I mean, he is a physical kid that likes to smack people.
Yes.
And I like that kid. I like kids.
Someone said in the chat when he was on that his nickname is going to be the tone setter.
Yes. I like that. Well done. Well done.
Yeah.
We have a super chat from Trash. He said the Herb speech rivals speech sticks with me. Okay. Appreciate that. And then we have one from Mark Stewart, my man.
Mark Stewart says Big Ten Network showed Notre Dame versus Michigan State in 2010, the fake field goal game. Mark, why are we talking about this game? The Notre Dame offense has some firepower, and Floyd, Theo Riddick, and Dane Christ even looked good. Michael Floyd was amazing. Can Merriweather be as good as Michael Floyd?
I don't think so. I mean, Michael Floyd
was a freak, man.
He was so good. I look, like Michael Floyd to me was a 5-star guy coming out. I mean, he was right on the same level as a college prospect as the two other stars in that level, AJ Green and Julio Jones. And Michael Floyd was the better player when they were freshmen. And if he doesn't get hurt as a freshman, I mean, his numbers his rookie year would have been silly if he didn't get hurt. I mean, he made a very quick impact at Notre Dame. You know what I mean? But yeah, Dane went off that game, right? He had 369 passing yards. Theo Riddick had over 100 yards receiving. Floyd had 2 touchdowns, and he didn't even mention they had Kyle Rudolph on that team. So, you know, I mean, that guy had. I mean, that team had some firepower. There's no doubt about that. And you know, when you look at when you look at what Michael Floyd did from the minute he got to Notre Dame, I mean, goodness gracious! In 2008, he catches a touchdown pass in his first game. He has 400-yard games in his last 5 before he got hurt. Actually, no, I'm sorry. When did he get hurt? Yeah, he got hurt against Boston College and didn't play the last few games. Comes back for the bowl game. Then the next year he comes out, and the year that Golden Tate wins the Biletnikoff, what a lot of people may not remember is Floyd was the one that started the season off even better. Against Nevada, Floyd had 4 catches for 189 yards and 3 touchdowns. Against Michigan, he had 7 catches for 131 yards and a touchdown, and then he had 2 catches for 38 yards and a touchdown early against Michigan State, and then got hurt, broke his collarbone, and came out. Floyd was the one that was off to even a bigger start that season than Golden Tate. Now, look, Golden Tate was still off to a good start that year. Don't get it twisted. You know, Golden had a couple pretty good games those first 2 games as well. But Floyd was the guy that Jimmy Clausen looked for. I mean, the first game Golden had 3 catches for 59 yards, and against Michigan, I think they both went over 100 against Michigan. Let me check real quick. Yeah, Golden had 9 for 115 and 2 scores. But Floyd was Jimmy Clausen's top target, and Golden doesn't win the Biletnikoff if Floyd stays healthy because the numbers would have been split more. They probably would have both had 1,000, but Golden would have had like 90 plus for 1,400 plus, that kind of thing. You know what I mean?
It's probably similar to 2020 with Devonta Smith, because people forget, but Jalen Waddle was actually the leading receiver on that team when he got hurt. Like, he was balling that year. And then obviously after he got hurt, it was like Devonta Smith show. Like, that's the guy now. Like John Mechie also, but like Devonta is our guy. Like, no one had any doubts about that. So
no doubt. Yeah, that's a really good example. Like that's an example that shows a correlation there, right?
Dude, Waddle was balling that year, man. Before he got hurt, he was balling out.
To me, though, if you're going to talk about how good can Tobias Merriweather be, to me, he's more Jeff Samardzija than he is Michael Floyd. And to me, just stylistically, athletically, Floyd was an incredibly powerful football player.
Yeah, that
was also a lot faster than people gave him credit for a guy
like 4.47 or something like that.
And could beat teams deep. I mean, it wasn't like he was catching a bunch of hits. Now, his last year, he was very low yards per catch because of just the way that they used him. But his first 2-3 years, he was a big play machine, right? I think he was like 18 yards a catch his first 2 years. It was nuts.
Yeah.
And, he was a lot. Tobias is more smooth and fluid. I could say he's more of a Jeff Samardzija type of impact player than a Michael Floyd type of impact player. Where Michael Floyd, because, dude, if he's covered, it's like it didn't matter. Jimmy would just throw him the ball anyway. And he would just go out, play a guy for the ball. I mean, Tobias is not that guy. He's more smooth and fluid. And that's why I've compared him to T. Higgins. I think he's more of a T. Higgins type of player. Love T. Higgins. T. Higgins wasn't Michael Floyd. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Michael Floyd is just a physical, like you said, Ryan, you said freak. I think that's a good example. I mean, 6'3", 220 plus, 4'4", could jump, super long arms. And it's like Miami. It's like that Miami game in 2010, the bowl game, it's like he was playing against little kids. I mean, it just was like, he was like catching balls. They're falling down. He's like taunting them. It's just like, it'd be like if they brought an NFL player back to play against a bunch of college kids. Is like, that's what it was like. I mean, it was just, he was just a different dude on the field. It was like, we talk about guys that are different. Michael Floyd was just a freak. I mean, then against Florida State the next year, they put him back to return punts, and he returns one like 40-some yards. You know what I mean? It's just like could you imagine if he would have had Jimmy Clausen for 4 years? I mean, phew, goodness gracious. He'd have put up some crazy numbers. Or even if he just would have had Jimmy, I'll still say this, man. If Jimmy Clausen comes back in 2010, that Notre Dame team would have been really freaking good because Golden probably comes back too. Could you imagine that? Jimmy Clausen, Golden Tate, Michael Floyd, Tyler Eifert, and Kyle Rudolph on the same team with Sierra Wood and Robert Hughes at running back.
Oh, man, Robert Hughes, that kid. Yeah.
Oh, my goodness. That team would have been so good. Oh, man, that team would have been good. But, yeah, you're right, Mark. That team had some serious firepower, man. Some serious firepower. Just couldn't consistently do it and couldn't really run the football when they needed to that year. That was a problem that they had, to be honest with you. And then when Dane was just a really inaccurate quarterback. He just would go through these spells where he would just look like $1 million, and then he'd have these spells where it's like, this guy can't complete a pass. It was strange to say the least.
Next question from John Leahy says, what team do you think had the most impactful transfer class?
Well, I think it depends on a couple different ways you're looking at it. If you're just talking about volume, Colorado.
I guess. Yeah. I mean, the whole starting lineup's going to transfer. So
yeah. I mean, it's so hard to compare the different ones, Ryan, and
strategy's different.
Yeah. It's just, I mean, looking at like Colorado's got 47 transfer commits, 47. USC has 13, and they brought in some guys that are going to be somewhat impactful. I thought Oklahoma had a pretty good transfer class, to be honest.
USC only had 13. I'm surprised about that.
15.
Oh, 15. Okay.
Excuse me. 15. I did say 13. I'm going to say 15. They had 15 guys come in. So they had a good class. They had an impactful class. Had some guys leave as well. I mean, obviously they had some. They signed 15, but then they had some guys take off, obviously. Oklahoma, I thought, had a pretty good transfer class, to be honest with you. And I'll tell you, a team that continues to really do the portal well is Florida State.
Yeah, Florida State got Jeremiah Byers, the offensive tackle, who's a stud. So I agree.
And they got Braden Fisk, who I would have gladly taken at Notre Dame, to be honest with you. They had some departures. They had some guys they lost as well. Sure. Jaheim Bell's a good pickup. People are making a little bit more out of that pickup than I think they should, to be completely honest with you. But still good pickups nonetheless. And then they had a bunch of dudes leave for Colorado. Did you see that?
Florida State did?
Yeah. Let's see. They had five of their former players left for Colorado, at least. Yeah.
It's weird.
Yeah, but Braden Fisk was a good pickup. Fentrell Cypress is a guy that's getting a little bit more hype than he should, but he's a good pickup that they had. So that they've done well because he's doing it the way that you and I talked about that we think LSU is going to do it, where he had to go to the portal big early because he had to completely revamp his roster and the culture. But as he gets deeper into his tenure, you're seeing less and less numbers and more targeted pickups in the transfer portal. Oregon's had a nice portal session, but Oregon also lost a lot of dudes in the portal as well. And they did kind of more numbers to me than anything else. Ole Miss has had an interesting portal cycle, Ryan. That's going to be interesting. And I think Michigan had a really impactful portal session, Ryan, because I'm going to tell you right now,
lineman. Yeah.
If Miles Hinton is who I think he's going to be, man, that was a heck of a pickup. And they added some nice defensive pieces. They got the Hausman kid from Nebraska to go there. Josiah Stewart's an edge player he was from Coastal.
Correct.
Got him to go there. But Miles Hinton is a big one.
They got Darius Henderson from Arizona State, who's a good offensive lineman as well.
That's right. So again, they're not getting numbers. And honestly, I think Notre Dame had a big impact transfer portal class. It's just if we're talking about impact and not volume. So it's just so hard to 47 kids, Ryan, from Colorado.
They even had one kid that was a part of that just re-entered. So
unbelievable. Was that the tight end?
Yes. Yep.
Yeah, that's just nuts. I mean, absolutely nuts. I'm looking at this now, right? I mean, now they had some big name guys, obviously, but man, that's nuts. That is 47 guys. I'm looking at this now. Savell Smalls is a big name guy, but he hasn't played that well. He hasn't played like a 5-star since he's been in college.
No.
They had a bunch of guys from Florida State, a few guys from Alabama, Michigan, Taylor Upshaw. Again, a lot of guys that just weren't starters at other places are going to Jackson State. I mean, going to Colorado. Yeah, they still have Traore in there, Ryan, so they haven't even taken him out.
Yeah,
you said he's back in the portal, right?
Yep. Seydou Traore.
Yep. Travis Hunter, obviously, is a big name there. Yeah, it's wild. Did the Kevin Coleman kid, where did he transfer to?
Keon Coleman?
No, Kevin Coleman, the kid that was a freshman receiver at Jackson State last year.
I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I thought you were talking about Keon Coleman from Michigan State.
Yeah, I saw he's down to what? Did I read today? Florida State and Ole Miss, I think is what I read he's down to.
Didn't see that
I
one.
believe.
Didn't see that one. He's a good player, though. I like him.
Yeah, where is he going to? He is going to Louisville. Kevin Coleman's going to Louisville.
Interesting.
He was the other 5-star receiver that Jackson State signed in the year before with Dion. So I was curious where he went.
Next question is from JHT 1988. It says, Brian and Ryan, how strong is the SEC bias on major networks? Massive. You see two quarterbacks who didn't do much in Peyton Thorne and Tyler Buckner, and now they are seen as huge pickups.
Yeah, I had a thing there today. I responded to Ryan, where 24/7 Sports had overrated teams. And they had Buckner on there, right?
Yeah,
and Tommy Rees is this big loss. Now, listen, this isn't an anti-Tommy Rees comment. But if Tommy Rees was still at Notre Dame, no one's ranking him in their top 10 of offensive coordinators. Whether they should or I'm not even saying they shouldn't. I'm just saying, like, there's no way it would have happened. No way it would have happened. But now he goes to Alabama, and just like that, he's top 10 coordinator. And I'm going to have an article coming out here today. But they evaluated, they did quarterback rooms, right? Quarterback situations, which is just a silly way of doing it. But they had tier 1, right? And then tier 2, tier 1B, tier 2, tier 3, and tier 4. And then 4A and 4B. Guess where Notre Dame is in those tiers of college football teams, Ryan?
Tier 4?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Guess who they had in tier 3?
I didn't see this.
Alabama.
I have a guess.
Alabama.
3? Really?
They have Alabama's quarterback room ahead of Notre Dame's. No, Alabama's starting quarterback
I saw this.
is probably going to be a guy that got beat out by Notre Dame starting quarterback.
Yes.
And they have Alabama's quarterback room ahead of Notre Dame's quarterback situation ahead of Notre Dame's. And it's not even a depth chart. It's just the starter.
I did see
and it's just like, what are you talking about? They have Joe Milton in tier 3. They have Carson Beck in tier 3. They have Cade. So it's just it's an absurd thing. And then here's where it gets even dumber. They have Riley Leonard and Jaden Daniels and Sam Hartman in tier 4A.
Nice.
Do I need to remind you that they have Tyler Buckner, Jalen Milroe, Ty Simpson, Carson Beck, Kyle McCord, Drew Aller, and Joe Milton in tier 3? Like, tell me you don't watch these teams and you're only looking at recruiting rankings without actually telling me that. They have Frank Harris, who everybody here, most people here have only ever heard of Frank Harris because we've talked about him, right?
TSA,
love Frank
maybe.
Harris. You have Frank Harris in tier 2, Sam Hartman in tier 4. Guys, you're not serious anymore. When you're having these, you have KJ Jefferson, who, again, Ryan, I love KJ Jefferson. You can't have him in tier 2 and have Sam Hartman in tier 4. You know who's in 1B? You're going to love this. Jordan Travis. Okay, fine. Bo Nix. Okay, fine. Michael Penix. Okay, fine. You know who else is in tier 1B? Which is tier 1A is Caleb and Drake May. Do you know who's in tier 1B? Cameron Rising.
Oh,
Cameron freaking Rising is in tier 1B.
Yeah.
So it's not even just an SEC bias. It is so obvious that there's an anti-Notre Dame thing going on at ESPN. And 3 years ago, I would have said no way. But when you're doing stupid things like this, I can't take you seriously.
Who made this list? I know you said ESPN, but who actually
David Hale, who's one of their
Hale.
staff writers, who's a pretty well-known guy at ESPN as far as their writers.
Gotcha.
But it's just stupid. It's like, you know, so dumb. So dumb.
You know what they say, Brian? Can't fix stupid, man.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's just it's not even bias anymore. It's just dumb at this point in time. But let's be honest. I mean, there's bias. There's also a pro Big Ten bias. Like, so I'm watching Joel Klatt yesterday, and I like Joel Klatt. I do. I enjoy listening to Joel Klatt because even when I disagree with him, I feel like he at least will explain, here's why I see it the way I see it. I don't agree with you, but at least there's some rationale. Well, guess where he works? Fox News. Guess who Fox News has as its primary football conference? It's the Big Ten.
Big Ten, yeah.
So, of course, his top 5 has 3 Big Ten teams in it. Okay, sure. You want to put Penn State in the top 5? Whatever. You know, I mean, it's a Big Ten bias, in my opinion. So you see that everywhere, but it's getting beyond Big Ten, SEC bias. And it's just getting to the point where it's just, I can't even take you seriously anymore. You know, it's like watching politics on. I used to love watching politics, and I would watch CNN, I would watch Fox, I'd watch MSNBC. I just like kind of, but now it's just so I can't watch any of them now because it's just like you're not even trying to be serious at this point in time. It's like you're just like a reality TV show. You guys aren't even. This is all fake. This is all like just spin that you're just for ratings crap. It's not even serious. It's not even an attempt. Like I used to be able to have discussions with people on the opposite side of me politically, Ryan, where it's like I could at least feel like they were making a good faith argument. They believe what they believe about this issue. I believe what I believe, and we could have an honest conversation about it. Now it's like you're not even being honest anymore because you literally took the opposite stance of what you're taking now 3 years ago because it was proposed by someone of the opposite side. And that's true on Fox and all of them, right? This isn't like Fox is honest, but CNN's not. They're all crap, in my opinion now. Because it's like stuff that you would have so if you're a right winger, stuff that Donald Trump would do, you're all for, but you hated it when Bill Clinton did it, right? And now it's like people that support things that Joe Biden does hated it when Donald Trump did it. It's like you're not serious anymore. I can't take you serious anymore. And sadly, that's how sports media has turned into now, Ryan.
Yeah.
It's like I don't even think you believe that. That's the thing. I don't even think you actually believe what you just said. I think you're just saying it for some other thing.
Shock now.
Yeah.
That's all it is.
Because if you actually Joe, that's what I was saying about Joel Klatt. I think Joel Klatt actually kind of has convinced himself of that because partly why? Because he sees those Big Ten teams all the time. I think he thinks the way he does about Penn State because he watches a lot of Penn State games because he covers the Big Ten. So it's a bias, but I don't think it's an intentional misleading bias. That's the difference.
Right. Like he's convinced himself of it. It's not like he's being dishonest. Yeah.
And he's making an argument for why they're there. A lot of this other stuff is just either you're really awful at your job or you're just dishonest. And I think sometimes it's a little bit of both.
Well, I mean, it's like the whole Skip Bayless thing, right? Like people call Skip stupid. I'm like, Skip's not stupid. He just plays into it, man.
Exactly.
Like, that's what he's doing. Like
he's very smart, which is why he makes a crap load of money, right? I mean, because he knows that's what sells. Because you know what all these people that say he's dumb do?
Yeah.
How do you know he's dumb? Because you watch his show constantly.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yep.
So it's like, but how do you have Cameron Rising in tier 1B and have Sam Hartman in tier 4? Like, make that make sense for me, Ryan.
Yeah.
Make that make sense for me. Give me some sort of justification that you could say why Cameron Rising needs to be in tier 2 or tier 1B and Sam Hartman's in tier 4, and give me some explanation on why the Alabama kids are all ahead of Sam Hartman.
Conference championships. I don't know. That's all I got for you. I don't know.
It's just so stupid. So yeah, JHT
a better mustache. I don't know, man.
I'll be honest. I used to push back on this Notre Dame bias stuff. I thought it was fans being paranoid. I really did. But I've come to the point now where it's like it takes a greater leap of faith for me, Ryan, to say it's not biased than it does for me to say it is biased. It takes a far greater leap of faith for me to say that. And I can't anymore. It's just because it just happens so consistently.
It does.
And that's what makes it kind of really frustrating. And also is why I'm making some of the business moves that I'm making, because I'm like, if you don't like it, then do something about it, and I'm going to try my best to do something about it. So anyway, rant on that over. There we go.
Next question is from Brandon Plensner, who says, I actually see this 2024 class getting up to 28 total if they take 2 more Vipers, 4th wide receiver, 2nd tight end, flip Beasley, or take 3 more safeties and get a 2nd running back. Do you think they could push it to 28?
I don't see that. I think that's
a lot.
Number one. I don't think they're going to take a 4th receiver as of right now and a 2nd tight end. I think they'll take one or the other.
Yeah.
I don't think they'll take a 4th safety and flip Caleb Beasley. I think if they flip Caleb Beasley, there's no need for a 4th safety.
3 and 3. Yeah.
And I think, Ryan, I think 26 is kind of where I'm at right now as the max.
26 seems like a good number.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they could fall a little short of that, but that's what I think they're now I keep being told 22, 23, but there's no
chance.
Way 22,
we've been hearing that for months, Brian. I'm just like, the math doesn't add up.
And if you are believing that, why are you still recruiting certain players? You know what I mean? If you're only going to do 22, 23.
Exactly. I know.
So,
I remember the first time you came to that number with me. I'm like, I don't think the math checks out on that one, man. I just don't think it checks out.
Yeah. And carry the 1. Yeah, you don't know what you're talking about.
That checks out. I don't think it checks out.
I don't think that's right.
No.
Like, I know I wasn't a math teacher, but
especially when you start breaking it down position by position, I'm like, nope, that math doesn't check out. It doesn't. It's just not it. It's not it.
Yeah. Speaking of bias, we have another bias question here, Ryan, that we'll touch on just a little bit.
Tyler Smith says, I saw on 247 Sports that they think Notre Dame will be overrated this season. I know, Brian, I know you already wrote about this a little bit.
Yeah.
Is it just me, or is 247 more Big Ten bias when it comes to things?
Yeah, I don't know if I've picked up on a Big Ten bias for 24/7 Sports. I didn't even necessarily have an issue with what the guy wrote, as far as I didn't notice a bias in what he had said. I just thought it was kind of silly and just like poor argumentation. Like, part of his explanation, Ryan, for Notre Dame being overrated, because basically what he said, he took their average ranking, and if he thinks so, Notre Dame was 9th, and he's like, the Football Power Index, ESPN's FPI, has them going 9-3. Is 9-3 really going to have them in the top 10? Bro, it would have taken you 60 seconds to answer your own damn question, because you'd have looked at every team for the next 10 teams after Notre Dame in the FPI, or they're 9th in the FPI, are all 9-3 or worse. So if you're going to use the FPI for Notre Dame's record and then question if that has them in the top 10 and ignore the fact that every freaking team after them is 9-3 or worse, it's like, that's not bias. That's just dumb. It's just lazy, and so it just was like, they lost their top assistant. No, they did lose their top assistant, but it's not Tommy Rees, it's Harry Heastand.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's just, it's just getting lazy, Ryan. That's what it comes down to for me. It's just lazy.
Yeah.
And I feel like there's so many writers that don't want to be contrary. They don't want to be the people that are left out. Hey, everybody's hyping up so-and-so's backfield. I got to hype up so-and-so's backfield.
Oh, yeah. I mean, that's the echo chamber group thing stuff. That's
what
that is.
Yeah. And that's what I actually respect about Josh Pate, who's at 247, is I disagree with a lot of his takes.
Yes.
But I'm like, he's taking the opposite take of what I'm reading everyone else at 247 taking. And I respect that. I don't agree with him a lot, to be honest with you.
That's why people hate me on Twitter, because I'm not afraid to be contrary.
Exactly. Well, it's one of the reasons that I hired you, is because I knew whatever I feel about your opinion, I know it's going to be an honest, earned opinion that's going to come from doing the work, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I just can't stand people that just don't want to be. I don't want to be the guy that gets left. I don't want to take this stance and get left out. Like, to me, I'm gonna die on this hill, and if I'm wrong, I'm wrong, and I'll admit that I'm wrong. But I'm gonna die on this hill because I've put thought into it, and I just feel some of this stuff is just lazy. It's just really, really lazy. And I mean, having Notre Dame as one of your overrated teams, and you could make, like, I think you could make a case that Notre Dame is 9 is overrated. If you're going to say they should be 12 or 13, sure. I mean, I guess that's overrated, I guess. I mean, to me, overrated is more of like Texas A&M last year, who was like 6th, and I was like, I don't even think they're a top 25 team. That's overrated.
Right.
If you want to say Texas is a borderline top 5 team and Texas is a top 10 team is overrated, I'm going to make that case, even though I think I could see them finishing in the top 10. I just can't put them there right now. What have they done to be there right now? You want to argue that Washington at number 13 is underrated? Yeah, because I think you could make a case for Washington being 6 to 8. That's a pretty decent size. So if you want to make the case for Notre Dame being overrated, that's fine. My issue, Ryan, was more so he made a very bad argument for Notre Dame being overrated. This is a very poor argument. And that's really what I had the issue with, more so than saying they're overrated, was just if you're going to say they're overrated, make a better case. State your case better. Yep, and that was kind of my issue with it. But I don't know that I've noticed a Big Ten bias. Tyler, it may be. I just am not looking for it. So I'd love to hear why you think that is. I'm not saying it's not a Big Ten bias. I'm just saying I haven't noticed a Big Ten bias, right? Have you noticed any kind of Big Ten bias?
Nah, I'm trying to think through the memory bank a little bit, but nothing that's like
some of it. So, well, man, the top 3 running backs in the nation, and they all have Big Ten teams. I'm like, well, yeah, that's kind of what I think is true. I mean, I think the Big Ten does probably have the 3 best running back rooms now, especially now that Logan Diggs isn't at Notre Dame anymore. I think if Notre Dame still had Logan Diggs, you could have made a case that Notre Dame needed to be in there somewhere, in my opinion. But with Logan Diggs gone, I still think Notre Dame has a top 10 running back room, but it's not in the conversation with Penn State and Ohio State and Michigan now, because they all have 2 proven backs. Notre Dame has 1.
Yeah.
And so I'm not going to argue with the fact that, I'm not going to argue that the best receiver room in the country is Ohio State's. I don't think that's even arguable, to be completely honest with you. I don't know that there's an argument to make. And I'm someone who thinks Emeka Egbuka is a tad overrated as the number 2 receiver in the country. I think he's more 5 to 6. He's still really flipping good. You know what I mean? But just the depth of that room. So, you could say, well, overhyping him a little bit. And you're overhyping Michigan. Folks, I hate to break it to you, but Michigan's been to back-to-back playoff games. If Notre Dame had been to back-to-back playoff games and they weren't getting the push that that Michigan's getting right now, as far as we'd be all like, oh, it's bias. Why are they not giving Notre Dame more love? Right? Just made back-to-back playoff appearances. So I think it's more of just the recency bias as opposed to necessarily a Big Ten bias. 2 of the Big Ten teams in the playoff last year, and we're within 7 points. They lost by a combined 7 points. So I get it. And Penn State went 11-2 and won the Rose Bowl. So I think some of it's earned. Yeah. Sometimes a bias can be earned, right? And you're going to give a conference the benefit of the doubt because of what we've seen, right? Sometimes people have SEC bias because it's agenda driven and it's our network team and all. Sometimes the SEC bias is earned. I'm assuming this because of what I've seen from that conference, and I don't agree with it, but it's earned. It's more, to me, that's more fair. I can live with that kind of bias, to be honest with you, Ryan, because it's at least coming from this is what I've seen the last 2 years. Big Ten was pretty flipping good the last 2 years. Okay. Yep. But if you're doing it because, this is the conference that we cover, and we're going to hype them up unnecessarily and act like there's 12 SEC teams should be in the top 25, I don't respect you for that, because you're making bad arguments. You're not justifying it. So I think Joel Klatt has a Big Ten bias, but I think it's earned based on what he has seen with his own eyes as someone that covers the Big Ten.
It's fair.
Okay.
And it is hard for some of the national guys to see all the teams as well, right? So it's tough sometimes. It is. And speaking of SEC, apparently Logan Diggs is committed to LSU. So there you go.
Shocker.
Who would have thought?
Who knew? I was like, the only way he's not going to LSU is if they don't want him. And I don't know why they wouldn't have wanted him. Yeah. But he's not going to walk into that room and just be the guy as long as John Emery's healthy. Hey, I also did see that Paul Moala committed to Georgia Tech, and I'm really happy to see him getting that opportunity.
He was a good player for Idaho the last couple of years, man.
He was a really nice rotation player, really good special teams guy at Notre Dame. He just couldn't stay healthy.
Yeah.
That was a big thing. So good for him.
Very good for him.
Got a super chat from Rob M. How is Dylan Devizin doing so far, the new QB? Seems to be fitting in pretty well. Kids seem to like him. He's a good scout team kind of quarterback, right? He's got some tools there. Yeah. But not really the kind of walk-on that's ever going to be sort of make push for time or something down the road. He's
scholarship type of kid. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
If he's a scholarship type of kid, it's a reward for being there for a while. And because you have a year like this, Ryan, if he was a senior and during a year like this, they're like 82, you give him a scholarship, for a senior year kind of thing.
Next super chat is from Nathan Milton. Thank you so much, Nathan. He says, better movie, Tommy Boy or Black Sheep? Tommy Boy for me.
That's not even close.
Yeah.
That's not even close. It's Tommy Boy. I mean, that's an easy one, Ryan. Did you ever watch Black Sheep?
I'm not. Yeah, I wasn't a big fan of Black Sheep.
I didn't think it was very funny. I thought
Yeah.
it was them trying to. It was sort of like they were trying to redo Tommy Boy with just different characters.
Yeah.
I didn't think it was very funny.
Tommy Boy is a very enjoyable movie, though.
It was a great movie.
So
love that movie. Love that movie. All right, here we go. Here's David Lowe.
David Lowe says, I'm kind of a young buck, 38. I got you beat by 7 years there, David. But how was Notre Dame competing in the 80s? Were our recruiting classes really good? And if so, how with academic standards were they easier back then?
The academic standards weren't that much easier back then, but Notre Dame, Lou's first couple years did have a couple exceptions. And sometimes Lou just said, I mean, you've heard the story about Tony Rice. I mean, he just kind of promised him and said how, you know, it was that whole, it's better to ask for forgiveness than to ask permission kind of thing. But I mean, Notre Dame went through 3 years in a row, Ryan. I think it was the 89 to 91 or it was 90 to 92, 3 years in a row where Notre Dame was considered to have the best recruiting class in the country. And a big part of it is because Notre Dame became the cool school. I mean, that's the reality. I mean, why did Randy Moss want to come to Notre Dame and play in the triple option? Because it was the cool place to go to. I mean, you had Tupac rocking Notre Dame gear back then. Allen Iverson wanted to come to Notre Dame. It was the cool school. Why did they become the cool school? Because they took the bullies and punched them right in the freaking mouth in Miami.
Yeah.
And that's what they did and beat Miami 2 of the last 3 times that they played. And the Notre Dame brand is strong. And when you win, kids are going to look, and it's still true today. I mean, I remember talking to a couple Notre Dame coaches after they beat Miami in 2010, and they had won like 4 in a row. That team finished 8-5, Ryan. It's like we have kids calling us wanting to come play for us now that wouldn't give us a time of day. And I'm like, they finished 8-5 because Notre Dame is still a place that if you truly believe they're a title contender, there are a lot of kids that are going to want to go play for them. And especially now if Marcus Freeman has success, it takes it to another level. Because right now, Marcus Freeman is really is recruiting off of his reputation and his personality.
Yes.
Right? If he has a championship or something like that to build off of it, and he stays at Notre Dame like Lou did, you'll see Notre Dame recruit top 5 classes easily. Because the Keon Keeleys and the guys like that will stay. And it only takes a couple. It only takes a couple guys to kind of change your lot in life, so to speak, from a recruiting standpoint when it comes to the way that those systems are made. Yeah. But it wasn't so much that it really wasn't. It was a couple things. Number one, they were the cool school. The other thing too, and you can't ignore this. There was a lot more big time talent in the North back then than there is now. I mean, they signed Jerome Bettis and Bryant Young, 2 Hall of Famers that year. Jerome Bettis from Detroit, Bryant Young's from Chicago. You know, Rocket was from Pennsylvania. Ricky Waters was from Pennsylvania. I mean, there's still Southern kids. Tony Rice, South Carolina. Pat Terrell's from Florida. Derek Brown's from Florida. They still got plenty of Southern kids. But Todd Light was from East Lansing, right? I mean, he was from, from Michigan. There was a lot more elite Northern players back then than there is now, which also made it easier. My point is, I think they signed like 5 kids from Chicago in that 1990 class. That was the number 1 ranked class. Now, again, got Reggie Brooks from Oklahoma. I think Bobby Taylor was from Texas, right? So they got some guys from those areas, but the North just produced a lot more talent back then, Ryan, and that helped as well. But the one thing that is still true today, in my opinion, Tom Carter was a big time guy back. He was a Florida guy, so I mean they got their share of Southern guys, but Oscar McBride was a Florida guy, but they got elite players from the North. Chris Zortz was from Chicago, right? They got Aaron Taylor from California, De La Salle out in California. So they were always a national team, but it's easier when you've got an elite Hall of Fame running back an hour and a half from campus to your east and an elite Hall of Fame defensive tackle an hour and a half to your west and a 2-time All-American 2.5 hours, 3 hours northeast in Michigan in Todd Light. It's a whole lot easier to recruit. Oh, and by the way, he wasn't quite a Hall of Famer like the other guy, but we got another All-American nose tackle from Chicago as well, an hour and a half to our west. It was a lot easier. It was easier then because of the makeup of Chicago and Michigan and stuff like that still in Pennsylvania still being loaded. And Penn State could clean up in Pennsylvania, and there were still stars for Notre Dame to be able to go out and get and beat them for. And they could both be great. So that helped as well. But it wasn't like, oh, they had these really easy academic standards. They tightened some things up, and Lou had, Vinny Serrato brought in some guys that got in trouble, and and there was some of that stuff and that they pushed back on. But the school didn't like the fact that football was becoming bigger than the school, and Notre Dame always pushes back when that happens. But if Marcus Freeman wins, Ryan, they'll recruit similar to that. Sure. I mean, I'm not saying they're going to recruit a class guy like 5 Hall of Famers in it. That's I'm not talking about, but I'm sorry, it's like being elite classes. They'll do that because Notre Dame is a place where kids want to go to if they win, and especially if you got a guy like Marcus Freeman. Think about that, Ryan. With if Marcus Freeman, let's just say hypothetically that everything goes right for Notre Dame this year and they win a championship, and Marcus Freeman stays and he doesn't leave. I mean, dude.
Everyone's going to flock, yeah.
Oh, gosh, yes. I mean, there's no question. There's no question. Do you all really think that Alabama would have recruited the way that they recruited if they didn't win at all early in his tenure?
No.
Like if they'd have gone out in 2009 and Texas just beat their brakes off of them, do you think that, go out in 2011 in a rematch against LSU and LSU just pounds them? Do you guys really think that the juggernaut that came to be would have come to be? Now, they were signed a number 3 class in 2009, so he was clearly recruiting better. But it helped when they went out and won a title, and all of a sudden they were just able to kind of start stacking those on top of each other. Yeah. But it helps when you win. There's no doubt. Because kids want football especially, right? Kids want to win, man. They want to win.
Chicago's making a comeback in 2025, though, man. So let's make
They need to take advantage, man. They definitely need to take advantage.
Next question is from Fighting Irish 86. Thoughts on Isaiah Canyon? Do you think he stays locked in with the Irish, or does he officially decommit so he can take OVs to other schools?
I mean, he's given no indication. Like, I got sent the article that this is all coming from, and he was talking to a Southern guy who's a very pro SEC, pro Georgia reporter, nice guy, sure. But it just is. And he's like, I'm still undecided. I'm 50-50 if I want to take visits. And then they ask him about Notre Dame, and he's just raving about Notre Dame. And I'm like, only Notre Dame fans could read that and come away worried about Isaiah. I mean, to me, I don't know what he's going to do. And in this day and age, I don't know. I read it as he just doesn't want to tell that guy no, but he's given me nothing to be worried about at this point in time. Yeah. And he raves about the class. They're building something special and all that kind of stuff. If he starts taking visits, then I'll get concerned. But I'm not just going to react to every quote that he's asked about certain things in the media. If he starts taking visits and he decommits, I mean, it is what it is. Now, if that happens, he's not coming to Notre Dame. But until that happens, I don't have anything to worry about, and I just refuse to live in a world where I just constantly worry about what may happen. I deal with what is happening. And what is happening right now is he tells Notre Dame he's fully committed and has not done nothing with his actions to make me doubt that at all.
Well, I think that's the biggest part, is that I stopped reacting to words and I react to actions at this point, right? There are kids setting up visits. Are they going on visits? Where are they going? How often are they going? That's the stuff that really matters to me. How often are they talking to the staff? How much are they engaging? Who are they engaging with? Like, that stuff's what actually matters.
Yeah, exactly. All right, let's go here. Here's one.
We Are Not Marshall said, significant upgrades at key positions can only help. If Notre Dame has another 9-4 season, is it a disappointment or building towards something bigger in 2024, 2025? Oh, it's a massive disappointment.
Big time.
Massive. Yeah.
Big time.
With the talent on this roster, 9-4? Nah.
Because it's one of two things happens, Ryan, right? They go 8-4 and then win a bowl game, which is a big disappointment. Or, because then not only did you lose to the big 3, but you also lost to somebody else.
You lost someone, yeah.
A massive disappointment. Or you go 9-3 and lose to at least 2 of the big 3, and then you go to a bowl game and lose. And if you're playing a team at 9-3, you're not playing Georgia, who just missed the playoff. You know what I mean? Like, you're not playing it. You're playing a team you should beat. You're playing Arkansas. You're playing Baylor, something like that, right? I mean, good teams, but teams you should beat. And you lose that. That's a huge disappointment. I would have major questions about this football program if they go 9-4 this year. Major questions.
Yes.
Because I think this is a better roster. And I think the schedule's harder, but it shouldn't be that much harder, in my opinion. So, Yeah, I mean, last year's team went 1-2 against the big three and was competitive in all of those games to some degree. I think USC wasn't as competitive the Ohio State game was, in my opinion, but it was at least competitive. A couple of things go your way, maybe you have a shot. And when you consider Notre Dame was very shorthanded, that factors into it as well. But I'd be shocked if this team was worse than that. Like, if Notre Dame's worse than 10-2 in the regular season, I'm disappointed. And 10-2 could potentially disappoint me as well. I just don't want to get ridiculous with my expectations to where a 10-2 season in year 2 is like, I'm ready to forget it, screw it all, burn this place down. Like, I don't want to be that either.
Depends
but
what
anything
the
worse
looks like.
Yeah, exactly. Like if they're 10-2, Ryan, and let's say they beat Ohio State and they beat USC, but they lose a barn burner to Clemson on the road, and let's just say have a letdown game against Louisville or Duke or NC State early.
Yeah.
I'm like, you know what? Like, you got to learn to win some of those games, but you showed me something because you went out and beat Ohio State, you beat USC, and I don't think Clemson's going to be an easy place to play this year, Ryan. I don't. I think Clemson's going to be. I think they're going to be a really good football team this year. Are they? But they're going to be a good football team this year.
Yep.
So I could see a scenario where 10-2 is somewhat disappointing, but you can see the progress. Like that would be like more of the progress that we are not. Hey, look, it's not what I wanted it to be, but I saw some progress. Make a couple changes and tweaks, and you're good to go. There's no scenario in which 9-3 to me would be anything other than just a major disappointment. And I'm not like, what are you building towards? You're going to be better at quarterback next year. You're going to be better on the O-line next year when you lose Joe Alt. You're going to be better. You know what I mean? You're going to be better at corner next year without Cam Hart. I mean, what are we building towards at that point in time? I'm supposed to just magically believe that a team that I don't know, like there's this assumption that the roster is going to be better in 2024. I don't know that it could be, but we have a lot we need to see from guys we've never seen anything from before we get there. Where at least with this team, it's like, I know who Sam Hartman is. I know who Joe Alt is. I know who Blake Fisher is. I know what Cam Hart is. I know what Benjamin Morrison is. Even Riley Mills, if he just repeats last year's an upgrade at 3 technique.
Yes.
You know what I mean? Like there's a level of, I know what I'm getting. We'd have to project a lot. Now, Ryan, there's a scenario in which I think you and I agree that some of the young players step up. We could be talking about this 24 team, if they can figure it out at quarterback, could be special.
Yep.
But right now, May 16th of 2023, that requires a lot of freaking projection of stuff we have literally never seen before of happen in a Notre Dame uniform. And I just can't go there just yet, especially if this team goes 9-4, because then the stuff we'd need to see to project to 24 and 25 didn't go real well. You know what I mean? So, man, that would be just kind of put me in a bad mood all of a sudden, even talking about that, man.
All the shine would be off of the Marcus Freeman era too, if that happens. Wouldn't be.
Oh yeah, big time, because there'd be a couple bad losses in there, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Ooh, yeah. Here we go.
From John Leahy said, with the recruiting class filling up, do you not see Notre Dame flipping many recruits during the season if they are successful?
I don't look, if they're at 16, you and I said that we expect them around, let's just say 26 is a number. They're still 10 away. Right now, I can only say to you that I'm pretty confident that they're going to get at least 3 guys in June and July that I feel confident in. And then probably just the way that it's gone in the past, just following trends, you'll probably have another 2 guys that we're not necessarily predicting, 2 to 3 guys that we're not predicting that'll end up deciding, a Jaden Greathouse type, something like that. We're not really expecting him to commit this year, but maybe he does. That gets him to 22. That still leaves 4 guys in the fall. There will be some guys that you continue to recruit, Justin Scott, Elijah Rushing, guys like that. And then there's going to be some guys that you try to flip that you like, Caleb Beasley, guys like that.
Yeah.
So, let's just say somehow Kedron Young and Anthony Carey both commit to other schools. Well, don't be shocked if Notre Dame still tries to recruit them. Let's say Kedron Young commits to Baylor and Anthony Carey commits to South Carolina. Okay, you're Notre Dame. Keep recruiting them, right? Yeah. I mean, if they commit to Notre Dame, those schools aren't going to stop recruiting them. So I would rather see them try to do that with some of those positions than just go to the next guy. in my opinion, unless the next guy is also really flipping good.
Yes.
So, like, if they lose Anthony Carey and Keedron Young's still out there, keep recruiting Keedron, right? I mean, that's the next guy that you go to, or vice versa, right? But if you lose both of them, don't just take an easy commitment from some guy that's just a guy that fill a spot. If you believe in yourself the way you say you do and the way that I do, as far as the kind of team you're going to have, know that season is going to put you in position to flip some guys. And honestly, I don't want to see Notre Dame completely fill up by September, first week of September, because I do want there to be a couple spots for them to flip a couple guys, in my opinion, Ryan. And it's kind of where I would be. Because if they sign a class of 24, okay, I think you met all your needs.
You have to ride the momentum, right?
Yeah.
And if you are playing really good football, then I mean, I don't want to say wasting it because it goes into the future, but like on the recruiting side, you have to strike while the iron is hot a little bit too, right? So I think keeping a couple of spots open is a very advantageous situation if you are playing good football. I know that's a projection as well, but man, I really think this team's gonna be good, man. Like I just do. I just think it's gonna be a good team. We'll see though. See soon enough.
Yeah, I hope so, man. I really hope so. All right, let's move on.
Irishman 7114 says, assume Notre Dame makes the playoffs at 12-0 as a 2 seed. Who would you want them to play to win the championship? Mine is Michigan and Georgia.
Can't even put the N in there.
Can't put the M in there. Nope.
Here's what it is for me, Ryan. I don't care what order they play them in. I don't care if it's semifinals or championship. They have to beat, in my opinion, either Georgia or Bama to win a championship, whether that's beating them in the semifinals and then beating someone else in the championship game or beating them in the championship game. I don't care the order. But I think in order to truly get that respect that you need, part of why Ohio State gets a lot of respect for what they did in 2014 is they had to beat Bama to get there.
Sure.
Right? So a lot of people will tell you that the championship game wasn't the Oregon game. It was the Bama game. I don't think that's true. I think there's a darn good Oregon team that year with Marcus Mariota. Yeah. And that was not a great Bama team and Blake Sims, but it's still Bama. The perception was still there. And at that time, they only had 3 titles. I mean, imagine what it's like now. So let's just say hypothetically that Notre Dame gets into this in there and they happen to play a Big 12 team that gets in. Let's say Texas gets in and they beat Texas. Okay.
Yeah.
It's a big win, but it's, you've beaten Texas before, right? I mean, recently. And then let's say Michigan upsets Georgia or Bama and you beat Michigan. That's huge. That's huge. But to some degree, there's still going to be the perception of, well, yeah, but you didn't beat insert SEC team, right? Sure. It was a down year in the SEC. You go out there and smack Georgia or Bama, or even just beat them, smack them, I'm talking about winning. You will have beaten Michigan. You'll have beaten Ohio State, USC, and one of those 2 SEC powers in order to win a title. There's no talking that down. None in that instance. None. So for me, and yes, beating Michigan for a title as a fan would be really
incredible.
Sweet. To your point, Ryan, I hate Michigan.
Yes.
I don't want to have to play Michigan, but if we do play them, you better freaking beat them. That'd feel phenomenal. But just bigger picture as a college football analyst, Ohio State, Michigan, Notre Dame, Penn State, if one of those northern teams is going to claim hold to being a power and winning a title, it needs to include beating one of those 2 SEC teams in the playoff, in my opinion. Or LSU, if LSU, if LSU takes that next step this year, and they become the team to beat in the SEC, it's the same thing's true there. I mean, I do count them in that category. I'm just saying we anticipate Georgia and Bama being the best 2 teams in that league this year. At least I do anyway. We'll have that conversation later in the summer. That's what I mean by that. What are your thoughts on that, Ryan? I'm curious what you think about that.
I mean, because I think that there is a validity that needs to come with beating an SEC team. But I mean, I definitely want to beat one of the foes along the way. I mean, I'd even throw LSU into there, man. Like, I would love to defeat LSU. I would. I mean, call it spiteful. It's fine.
So let me ask you this, Ryan. As a fan, is not the dream scenario to beat Michigan in the semis and beat LSU in the title game?
Oh, yeah, that is. Yeah.
Or would it be the other way around? Beat LSU in the semi so Brian Kelly still doesn't have a playoff win and then beat Michigan in the championship. Which one would you rather have? We're talking. Forget the analyst. We're taking off our analyst hats and we're just talking straight as Notre Dame fans.
Yeah.
Which one of those two scenarios would you rather have? And
I'd
I'd be curious what everybody in the chat thinks about this as well.
I'd rather beat Michigan in the semis and then defeat
Mhm.
Brian Kelly in the championship. I really would. I
Okay.
know Brian Kelly would win a playoff game and he would get to a championship, but it's just a very unlikable person.
Yes.
I mean, that's just kind of where it is, man. Like, I would just love to halt the ability for him to win a championship in the final game. Like, that would just be so sweet to me.
Why? I'm not arguing. Why the final game and not the semifinal game?
Because I don't want Michigan to get an opportunity to win a championship in general. I want to end that reign before they even get that chance. Because honestly, and I think this might be a hot. No, I don't think it's a hot take. I would rather see Brian Kelly win a national championship than Michigan win a national championship. That's just kind of where I am with it. I would much rather.
Really?
That. Yes.
You'd rather BK win a title than Michigan?
Yes.
Wow.
Because at least I could
that's
say.
Interesting.
At least I could say LSU's done this with other overrated coaches in the past, right? Like, I could still sit there. I do not ever want to see Michigan win a national championship. Don't want to see it. Don't want to see it.
I take a different stance on that. I hate Michigan, but I don't hate Michigan as much as I hate the SEC. I just don't. I don't ever honestly, if it came down to Michigan, it's LSU in the championship. I'm rooting for Michigan. For two reasons. Number one, my feelings towards Brian Kelly, and number two, it's the SEC. I can't do it. I can't do it. I get it, but I just can't. I can't do it.
I would pick neither, but if I had to pick one,
I know, right?
That's what I would pick.
Seriously, can we just cancel the season at that point in time?
I can't.
I'd rather Michigan. I'd always rather the northern team beat the southern team. Always. I've always been that way. Always been that way.
Not Michigan. If it's Ohio State or something, sure. No.
But I say that sitting here now on May 16th, Ryan, is if we got who knows how I'd feel when it actually was a reality. You know what I mean? A potential reality. But yeah, I think I'd have to go with Michigan on that one. I can't root for the SEC, man. I can't.
If it was Ohio State or Penn State or somebody else, then I'm with you, but not.
Well, and just even as a Notre Dame fan, I still believe this. When Northern teams have success, it benefits all of them. It really does. Yeah. I mean, it's like who's won the there's 16 SEC teams right now or 14 SEC teams right now?
I think 14.
Only 4 of them have won a title in the last 10 years, right? Well, not even. If you want to go back all the way to 2010, it's Auburn, Bama, LSU, and Georgia. That's it, right? Tennessee hasn't won one. Florida hasn't won one since 2008. But the whole league benefits from the small number of teams that have won it, right? I mean, I think it's the same thing as true here is if, like, let's say we get to the postseason and Michigan wins a title and Notre Dame goes to the Cotton Bowl and beats an SEC team, and Ohio State goes to the Rose Bowl and destroys Oregon, and Penn State goes to some bowl in Florida and beats, I don't know, LSU or something, and Michigan beats Bama. Yeah, that sucks as a Notre Dame fan because you have to watch Michigan win, but that's good for Notre Dame. It's better for Notre Dame as a program, not for us as fans, but it's better for Notre Dame as a program because all of a sudden the North has risen, and now all of a sudden all Northern teams become more attractive, in my opinion, because hey, you know what? They play pretty good football up there, and there's a lot of NFL teams up there, that I get to play in front of every week. I mean, that's one of the things you can sell. Hey, do you guys understand how many NFL teams are within a 5-hour drive of here? You know what I mean? Like, do you understand that? Does that really click in your head? There's a lot more NFL teams up here than there is down there, and that's ultimately where you want to be, right? And that's true, So I think that would be. But I say that now, Ryan, but then I'd actually get to the point where I'd actually have to root for Michigan. I'm like, nah, I can't.
And then I have to see Jim Harbaugh raising the trophy as he's eating.
I would never see that. I would never see that. I would have turned it off by then. As soon as the clock hit 0, click, going to go do something else. I'm not watching that nonsense. And then have to listen to his ridiculous, incoherent speech after the game. No, I wouldn't listen to that. I just pass on that action. On that action.
Yeah.
All right.
I agree. Next question is from Nathan Milton. He says, has Coach Marcus Freeman changed fans' recruiting expectations in a good way? I asked because fans have been down on the last 2 classes, and they were excellent teams compared to previous years.
I think so. I think that's part of it. I think the expectation is like Marcus Freeman's going to land number 1 ranked class and all that. And especially since they were ranked in the top 2 for so long last year. Number 1, I think that fans pay too much attention to the recruiting rankings, and I understand why. I don't care to get into that debate again. I just don't buy it. Just not going to – I don't want to get into that again. But I don't buy it. That was a heck of a recruiting class that Notre Dame had last year.
Yeah.
This year, I think there's a little bit more understand. I'm a little bit more why some fans aren't as high on this class as they should be, in my opinion. Because Ryan, we can't ask all the people in here to be film experts, right?
Sure.
I mean, I understand some of y'all have 9 to 5s. You're going home. You've got 3 kids. You don't have time to sit down there and break down Cole Mullins' film. So you rely on people like us to do it, and you've grown to trust our judgment. But they also will rely on some of the other people that do it. Like, why would they give him a 3-star? I understand all that. And I think there are some kids in this class that I think are criminally underrated, in my opinion.
Yes.
Leonard Moore, by everyone but rivals, is criminally underrated, in my opinion. Cole Mullins, to me, is criminally underrated. Isaiah Canyon was, but he's starting to get more respect. Like On3 has him in the top 100. But at least one service still has him as a flipping 3-star. You know, I mean, so there are some guys in this class, like a couple people have Peter Jones as a 3-star. Now, you could argue that Rivals has him too high at number 90 overall.
Sure.
But he's not a 3-star. So I think there's some really bad rankings right now for Notre Dame kids, right? I'm okay with Kennedy Urlacher being a 3-star. I have him a little higher, but I get it. I'm fine with it. I'm okay with Carson Hobbs where he is. I'm okay. I think that one service says Bryce Young is a 3-star. I'd have him on their system as a low 4-star, but I get it. I'm cool with it. Owen Wafel's vastly underrated.
Yes.
Right now. Vastly underrated. Cole Mullins is incredibly underrated. But I also understand why fans feel the way they feel about star rankings. I get it.
CJ Carr is the 150th player or whatever in the one ranking.
192nd.
196. Stupid.
It's so dumb.
So bad.
If you had him at 92, I'd be flipping out saying you were nuts. Yeah. But 192.
It's wild.
So I do get that, Ryan. I do think that with this class especially, I understand why some people are a little bit more down. I don't believe it because my eyes tell me something different, right? Yeah. Like my eyes tell me something different with Cole Mullins than what the rankings do. And you and I don't even necessarily have the same opinion of Cole Mullins, but we both agree that he's definitely not that.
No, he's definitely
better than that.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where I'm at with it. So, but I also think that the expectation is that he was going to do even better. And I actually think he's doing pretty good recruiting wise. It can get better.
Yeah.
It just needs to get better. I think the other thing too, is I think some Notre Dame fans just like being upset about stuff. There are definitely some people in this chat that no matter what Notre Dame does, they're going to find a way to spin it into a negative. And
there's people we don't hear about until something bad happens.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
it's okay. It's okay to
it.
be excited. I haven't said that in a while, but it's okay to be excited sometimes.
Yeah. All right. Last couple, Ryan, and I know you got to get out of here. Let's see here because I want to end the Cardell Jones Stetson Bennett one at the very end. So
I didn't even see that one.
Yeah.
Nathan Milton said recently on IB it was mentioned Notre Dame should have landed Monroe Freeling. Why was Notre Dame unable to get him in the class?
You want to take a shot at that one, Ryan?
Yeah, Nathan. So there's a little bit more to it that is probably more of an Irish breakdown tailgate thing at some points. But I mean, basically what happened was there was a really weird visit. It was going good with Monroe early on in this visit when they had him on campus. And then there was just kind of this weird vibe that happened throughout the season. And there was this report that went out that Notre Dame wasn't willing to go to 6 offensive linemen, but even though that's
they
not
liked other guys more than him,
right? And Notre Dame had not said that
during
to Monroe Freeling.
It was right before his visit.
Yes. So there was this weird information out there that like they weren't going to push for Monroe. He wasn't their guy they wanted in the class. They weren't going to push the 6. So then there was just this real awkward vibe to like the remaining part of the visit between Monroe and Notre Dame, and Monroe, I guess, kind of fed into it that like that's real, that's true.
It's very immature on his part.
Yes,
very immature on his part.
Even though Coach Heastan had never told him that, nobody on Notre Dame staff had never told him that. They always wanted Monroe Freeling, and I truly believe that if that information doesn't get out there and Monroe doesn't really believe it, I think that Monroe Freeling ends up with Notre Dame. I do.
Because Ryan, you remember, I was told, and I told you by a decision maker at Notre Dame before his visit that he was the number 1 offensive tackle on the board.
Yes.
And then there's this report comes out about how they like Elijah Page better. I'm like, I don't know who you're talking to, but that's not what I'm being told.
Yes.
And that stuff got to him. Now, here's the thing. It shouldn't have.
No.
In his defense, like, okay, why would they be reporting this in a way that comes across as they're getting sourced information? Okay, fair.
It's very fair.
But at the end of the day, you asked Notre Dame about it. You ask them to be honest with you, and you're going to believe it or not. But it was just weird because they would never believe when Notre Dame was telling them that's not true.
Right.
And so once the visit was over,
situation, man.
yeah, and it's the way he acted the rest of the visit just kind of then turned Notre Dame off of him.
Yeah.
To be honest with you, and I was like, hey man, if this is how you're going to be, and you're going to get this way because of some guy on a message board's putting something out there, maybe this isn't the place for you.
Right.
So that visit completely turned both sides off of each other completely.
Yeah. Yeah.
In my opinion.
And at that point, Nathan, I mean, this isn't like super in depth, but at that point I had a really good relationship with Monroe Freeland.
Yeah.
I didn't hear from him for days because of that whole situation. Like it was just a weird situation that happened, man. Very strange.
Yep. Very much so. Very much so.
We had another question for, same one. That was the same one.
Okay. I must have had the same one up there twice.
You're good.
All right. Here's the last one we're going to get to here. This is hilarious.
Archer says, did everyone see Cardell Jones's retweets of Stetson not graduating from UGA, even though he was there for 6 years? It was chef's kiss. Dude,
that is so lame. That is so how are you in school for almost a decade? It's like funny because we were talking about Tommy Boy earlier. Like Stetson Bennett is the modern day Tommy Boy. Lots of people go to school for 7 years. Yeah, they're called doctors. It's like, how do you go to a state school since 2016 and you're leaving in 2023 and you're closer to 30 than you are 20 in age and you don't have a freaking degree? And then how does this guy get drafted? Like, this is what kills me about the NFL. They do this all the time. They get shocked when these guys they draft who had no character come to their teams, and now that they've got money, still act with no character. When in the history of mankind have you given an irresponsible money and it makes them responsible?
Right.
When has that ever happened? It's just, so I feel bad for you, man, because he's on your team now. But like, that guy is just, I have a lot of feelings on this. I'm not going to lie to you. And some people aren't going to like this, but I do feel that if he looked different, this story would be much more national news, in my opinion. It's just my opinion. I could be wrong on it, but it's embarrassing. I love Antoine's response. Stop hating on old people. I just think it's an absolute joke that the starting quarterback for the back-to-back national champions played until he was 26 years old and did not get a degree.
It was there for 7 years, too.
Ever talk to me about how you actually care about academics ever again. You are a football factory and everybody knows it.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, Jalen Hurts goes to the NFL, wins an MVP, plays in the Super Bowl, and he's going to graduate before Stetson Bennett.
Yes. It's weird, man. It's so weird. And you know what's going to happen?
Wasn't that a master's? Didn't he get a master's from Oklahoma?
Get a master's, yeah.
So that's his second freaking degree.
Yes.
And this clown can't get an undergraduate degree from a state school in 7 years.
Yes.
It's an embarrassment, is what it is. It's an embarrassment.
State eligible and stuff, and there should be something, like, it has to be something about this.
How did he possibly take 12 credits a semester,
yeah,
pass all those classes? Because if you're only taking 12 semesters, you have to pass all of them, Ryan. Otherwise, you don't have enough credits. How could he have possibly stayed eligible playing in college? Now, again, he spent a year at junior college. He spent 6 years at Georgia, correct?
Yes.
How do you stay eligible for that long and not be on path to graduate with an undergraduate degree? You could take a gen ed degree and graduate on time. It's embarrassing.
No idea, man. No idea.
And I can't believe, and you want to talk about SEC bias?
Yeah.
If that happened at Notre Dame, if they found out that Ian Book graduated or went through 5 years in Notre Dame and didn't graduate, they would savage Notre Dame for that. Rightfully so.
Yes.
What are you doing here? The kid, since he left your school, he left with more arrests than he did degrees. Think about that.
That's insane. And he only had to get arrested once.
Exactly. It's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment. And I don't care what the explanation. Oh, he kept switching. I don't care if he kept switching. That's stupid. At what point in time do you sit down and say, hey, dude, stop switching majors? You're not going to graduate. Right? Isn't that what are they academic advisors are meant to do? I mean, you can hammer Alabama all you want, but you know what? Their quarterbacks all have degrees. Jalen Hurts freaking got 2 of them in 4 years, folks.
Yes, he did.
Like, stop. It's embarrassing. Like, Georgia fans should be embarrassed. They're not. They don't care. They don't care. They got their championships. They don't care. Yep. They should be embarrassed. They should be absolutely embarrassed, in my opinion. And really bad, I don't know how that kid passed a background check. That's the other thing for me. To be drafted in the NFL, what, 4th round? 4th round?
I honestly, this is a very hot take, and I believe this, Brian. The Rams are one of those very unorthodox drafting teams. I don't think that any other team would have drafted Stetson Bennett. I truly don't. I really don't. It's just, but it takes one team, man. One team that always does this stuff. The same team that drafted Tutu Atwell in the 2nd round a couple years ago. Yeah. Unorthodox, man. It's stupid. It's dumb.
Troy McIntosh made a great point, Ryan. These kids go to school all year now. That's the other thing.
In the summer, in between breaks, accelerated classes. Yes. Yep.
It's embarrassing. And of course, it's a joke it's a funny haha on ESPN with some of those people.
Yeah.
Like, they should be getting savaged for this. Georgia should. That's a dereliction of, if a guy leaves after 3 years and doesn't have his degree, okay. Notre Dame's had that. I mean, you can get a degree in 3 years now, but it's hard. I mean, look, Kyle Hamilton left early, didn't get a degree, but he came back right away, got his degree. I'm fine with some guys leaving and not having their degrees because they left early and, they're getting a chance to go play in the NFL and they're elite players and all. I mean, you're going to tell a kid who doesn't have his engineering degree, no, turn down that multi-million-dollar offer at the best, engineering firm in America because you don't have your degree yet? No, clearly they see enough of you already that they're ready to hire you. The number one law school and law practice in America is going to offer you a huge deal, even though you haven't finished law school. Now, if that was legal and you could actually pass the bar, you know what I'm saying? Like, if there weren't those things, but you're telling me you would say, no, I'm going to stay and finish my degree. Well, why do we expect athletes to do that? The profession you choose to get into feels that you're ready to go there now. Okay, go.
Yeah.
Right. But this dude was there forever.
And I mean, and I'm kind of, I don't want to say upset, but like, Kirby Smart, man, like, you're trotting this guy out as the face of your organization, of your of your program, right? And it's just like, this stuff is happening and you're still trotting him out there like that. Like, it's
even worse if he didn't know it was happening. Like, seriously.
He definitely did. There's no way
if he ever tried to say, hey, we weren't, that's even worse.
Yeah, it's
that's
BS
even worse
anyway. But yeah,
it's
just bad. It's a bad look, man.
Yeah.
It's a really bad look. I mean,
because I remember doing that, right? I remember I changed my degree in undergrad. And then I was going to change it again. And they're like, dude, you can't change it again after this. Because I was a history major.
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm just going to do kinesiology and I want to be a football coach and teach PE. And they let me do it for a semester. And then I went to change it back. They're like, you can't change it again. Because if you change it again, you're not going to graduate. So I went back to history and,
I did something similar. I did something similar as well. Yeah.
But I mean, how many times it's embarrassing. And Kirby Smart should be ashamed of himself. But you know what? He isn't. He doesn't care. He's got his 2 rings. Georgia fans don't care. They got their rings. $20. We're going to get a bunch of comments from Georgia fans and after the show is over, because just like the LSU fans that jumped in the rapid fire the other night that Sean did, talking about beating LSU for Antoine Carter, they're going to jump in this chat on their feelings. Notre Dame sucks. When was the last time you won a title? Completely missing the point of everything that we just said. That's going to happen because they can't help themselves. They don't care.
Yes,
they got their rings. They don't care because to a lot of schools in the South, especially. These kids are not people. They're pawns for us to get our joy and satisfaction. Right. One of the things I love about Notre Dame fans, and they're not the only one, but a lot of, is Notre Dame fans take as much pride in the men that these players become after football as they do for what they did in the football field. That's why we had Antonio Carter talk about what he talked about. But for a lot of fan bases, it's like, I don't care. He didn't win any championships. Hey, did you hear about your former quarterback is now a business owner? He's doing this, and he's raised, his organization raised $10 million for underprivileged youth last year, and he started 3 new schools for families, and they've raised enough money where none of those kids have to pay to go to this private school. I don't care. He couldn't beat so and so.
Yeah,
like that would be the response, right? And that's sad. Somebody asked, isn't he like
it's
25 years old? He's 26.
It's even worse too, because I mean, Stetson Bennett's a hero in Georgia, right? So like,
Yeah.
he's never gonna have to do anything again in his life.
Yeah.
It's just like people will just be like, "Yeah, man, come
Yeah.
own this car dealership, and you're
Right.
good to go for
Exactly.
the rest of your life."
Exactly.
Like, you're
It's
fine.
embarrassing. It's embarrassing. It's absolutely embarrassing. Anyway, that's my rant for this, but I just had to talk about it because, you know, somebody asked this. Archer 452 reports is now that Pat McAfee is heading to ESPN. Do you think that will help ESPN's fan perception stop hemorrhaging? No, it's people are going to view him as a sellout. That's what people are going to look at him as. You went to work for them, and they're kind of right. I mean, not that he's a sellout, but like ESPN, those people are just going to stop watching him and be mad at him.
Yeah,
they're not gonna. Oh well, I guess ESPN's cool now. You know, they'll only watch his show. That's the only other thing that they're going to do. But Ryan, here's the thing. You don't need to watch ESPN anymore, because you know where all his shows are going to end up being? They're going to end up being on YouTube, and they're going to be cut up and put on Twitter. And that's the whole thing. That's the whole point of all that. A lot of the problems. I don't have to watch ESPN ever to be able to hear what ESPN says, because I can go watch it on Twitter. I can get the snippets on YouTube, or I can watch it on YouTube. I get the snippets on Twitter. I don't have to watch ESPN. So no, I think some people will stop watching his show, and the people that don't will just only watch his show and nothing else. And that doesn't really solve a whole lot, in my opinion. So no, I don't think that's going to help the fan perception. Have you ever actually watched a Pat McAfee show? I have not.
No, I've
seen little snippets on
Twitter
and stuff, but I've never actually sat and watched his show. Not saying there's anything wrong with it. It's just not my thing. Like a dude in a cutoff t-shirt standing up screaming the entire show is just not my thing. It's just not for me. So,
you know what?
And then AJ Hawk just sits there chilling, smoking cigars. That's the one thing I have seen, which is pretty funny.
The best part of this show is the old jokes that are getting thrown out in the chat about Stetson Bennett.
I know, it's great. It's great.
Yes.
I absolutely stop picking on that old man.
Stetson's first sponsorship is from AARP. That's my favorite one so far.
Oh, that's phenomenal. I absolutely love that. Absolutely love that. Oh my gosh.
Doesn't Stetson have kids who have more degrees than him?
It's not wrong. It's not wrong. I think his oldest kid just committed to Georgia to play quarterback yesterday or something like that. I'm not sure.
Yeah. What is Stetson Bennett's favorite underpants?
Oh my, no. We're going to have to cut this part out of the podcast. Anyway.
I'm almost crying.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, that's gonna do it. Right, take us out of here, man. We've gone off the deep end.
Love y'all, man. You're all great. I want to thank you all so much for being here on the Irish Breakdown podcast. If you please hit that like button, subscribe to the podcast, notification bell. We'll be back tonight, 6:00 Eastern time for IB Nation Sports Talk. Also, make sure to go to boards@irishbreakdown.com for latest intel, both recruiting and team-wise. We are only about 90 days away from the college football season. It's going to fly by quick, so make sure you tap into irishbreakdown.com. From Brian, I am Ryan. We thank you, as always, for joining us today on the Irish Breakdown podcast.